OTB AM.
With Gillette, your most supported our frontline workers this Movember.
7:30 on this Friday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It is Eoin and Adrian with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And we've got a special sit-down between Kieran Donaghy and Jim McGuinness coming your way this morning as they discuss where the football championship should go next year. We've also got Alan Quinlan talking rugby. We've got Louise Galvin looking ahead to the weekend's GEA. And we've got Phil Egan marking your card for the weekend's Premier League action with his must-watch, might-watch / won't watch games. As ever, you can get in touch with us by tweeting us at Off The Ball. You can comment on the YouTube stream as well and make sure to click subscribe there if that's where you're watching. Adrian, Barry, a very good morning.
Morning, all.
So most people watching Dundalk last night will feel the sense of, oh, this is a bit unfortunate, but better luck next year. You are very different. You have not only felt that, you've come up with a plan to fix all the ills of Irish football.
I don't know what the plan is, but I was certainly looking at Dundalk last night, and you know, I'm a lapsed Athlone Town supporter as well, and that's been a tough week obviously on that front too, but it did have me thinking last night that I've enjoyed watching Dundalk an awful lot over the last number of weeks, and I wanted more. Like, it's too sporadic, isn't it? Like, how often do we see, there's not been many Irish teams that are qualified for that level of Europe, and I really want to see more of it. And like, it struck me last night that I've seen probably more Dundalk on the tally this year than I've seen of the Republic of Ireland, which I think would be true of most sports fans as well. So sports fans. So that was really what I was thinking on, and then I got thinking about how could we put in place a situation where we could get more of this in our TVs, and you could have more regular European football for Irish teams. It's not straightforward. I probably should start off by saying that. Go on.
No, it's just, so you've basically devised a plan to ensure that Dundalk qualify for the Europa League every year, that we have an Irish team in the Europa League every year. What's the end game here to ensure that we have eyeballs on our screens on a Thursday night every year, but there's an Irish team playing every single year?
Yeah, and it can't be one team is the thing, because I think it falls flat there straight away. And listen, I'm going to start off by saying it's a pretty radical way of looking at this thing, so I'm going to put that marker down straight away. But there are a few key principles of it all, right? Firstly, that the league itself would have to agree, first of all, what success actually looks like for teams emerging out of the League of Ireland. Qualification for and playing in Europe, in my view, should be chief amongst it. And the league then would become a secondary priority, and that would just have to be a fundamental core principle of the agreed starting blocks. Strong arguments, obviously, for both, I'm sure, and but it's a founding stone of any discussion around this. If the league don't buy that, then this idea in itself is dead, right? So being mindful that the league is currently and has been run obviously by private interests as well, this proposal is to try and wrestle some of the control back into the arms of the league itself, that at the minute it's obviously outsourced to private commercial business people or private owners, and the league has less of an ownership of it, in my view, than it should do. So this helps address some of that as well. Another founding principle, and essentially the core of this idea on, is that you'd have a nominated team in a cycle of agreed number of years. So let's for discussion's sake here, every 3 years in this cycle, you have a nominated team, and that's not a random nomination. You get that nomination on merit, right? So the qualification to be nominated for that cycle works on a coefficient point system, and that's based on season after season. You get cumulative points, and you, depending on where you finish on the table, and other factors if it's decided that way. But if you're on top of that table, then you are that nominated team, unless that you've been that nominated team in any of the previous 3 cycles, in which case the nomination goes to the next team down, and so on. And that's just the thing that allows it to be a meritocracy, and it allows a system where it's not always in the gift of the top 2 teams of the country. It has to be that bigger pot of possible teams that can enter. And the key is to make sure that when you then become that eligible team, that you're in the best position to take it. So it's all about timing, and timing your run correctly. And the other thing is that you might only, obviously, in that context, finish second in the league, but still secure the nomination. And the other aspect of that then is that some years that's going to mean it's a team who don't automatically qualify for the Champions League, i.e. the team who win the league won't be the nominated team. And so in that instance, you have to ensure that you put a system in where the nominated team can't come from below Europa League qualification, let's say. At the minute, that's third in the table, with the 4th place going to the FAI Cup. So I'd also be proposing that 4th place is taken away from the FAI Cup winners and just given to fourth place in the league to help best facilitate this and keep it as that meritocracy. It means, of course, then there's room for any team in the country to get their coefficient high enough over a number of years. You put a good enough business plan in place and be in a position to pierce that top four and get yourself in the mix for it. Coefficient also adds that extra level of intrigue and talkability, and another reason for teams to go hell for leather towards the end of the season, because even though positions might be roughly decided, it still helps your coefficient to try and win as many games as you can, even though the season might be over. So the other thing is that you have a situation at Dundalk at the minute. It's been spoken about over the last couple of weeks. You've the likes of Sean Hoare and Gannon possibly leaving Dundalk at the end of the season, and maybe more as well. And this is something that happens on a fairly regular basis. It would probably still happen, but it just happens at the minute in such an unstructured way that I think it's a blight on the development of the league's best team, and it can result, it won't in Dundalk's case, but it can result in that boom-bust culture of teams dominating leagues until ultimately they run out of money. And we've seen the evidence of this over the last 20 years. They run out of money, our players get better offers elsewhere, and off they go. And so the proposal would be to do away with the unstructured nature of that and try and put some structure around it in terms of bringing the best players into that nominated team. So part of the package for the nominated team obviously would have to be financial investment, and that money would come from increased TV coverage and rights. Suddenly there'd be a bigger interest in who that nominated team would be. Consistent flow of European money obviously is key to this. So the money that comes in, like Dundalk have done obviously this year, and also that raise all boats. And obviously the objective of the plan would obviously be in relation to merchandise. Attendances should all be up as well, you would expect, as part of all this.
Well, sorry, so just to clarify here, you're talking about a nominated team from the League of Ireland, and this nominated team, how is that decided? Where does that team come from? Where are they based? Who are the nominated team?
It's a different team every 3-year cycle, right? So let's say at the minute that's Dundalk, right? Their coefficient, for discussion's sake, I don't know what it would look like over the last 3 or 4 years, but their coefficient will be higher than everybody else's. So they get that nomination for the next 3 years, and they get that bank of backing from the league, essentially. And then once their 3-year cycle is done, then that cycle is up, and then it goes back to the coefficient table. So let's say over that period of time, Bohemians have gone on to win the league over the previous 2 years. They're obviously going to be in the best position to be that nominated team for the next 3 years. So Dundalk at that point have to take a back seat.
But what if they've won the league? What if Dundalk have won the league and they've won like 4 or 5 titles in a row? They're just going to be told that you can't partake in Europe.
Exactly. So no, not that they can't partake in Europe, not at all, but that they're not going to be this nominated team. So there will be. So that's what I was saying earlier. So there will be 4. There's obviously at the minute 4 positions for Europe from the League of Ireland. 1, the winners go into the Champions League. I don't think that there's anything that ultimately this proposal will be able to do to change that. I think ultimately if you end up winning the League of Ireland, you have to get the reward going into the Champions League, whether you're the nominated team or not. But then the 3 below that. So it's boxed off at the top 4 teams, and one of those 4 teams, depending on what area of the cycle we're in, will end up going. Will end up going into. They'll all go into Europe anyway, but one of them becomes the nominated team.
So they just get extra backing. They become so. Whatever the investment is, and that's probably a conversation for another day. This is just an idea this morning. Wherever that investment is coming from, it is going to get funneled into this nominated team, and all of the FAI's resources will go into one team.
No. So the money is coming from the money that they bring in from Europe, like millions of euro in a way that, and this is why I say we should have a serious conversation about whether the League of Ireland is a priority or Europe is a priority, based on the millions of euro that will come in for Dundalk this year that you just can't replicate within the League of Ireland. The evidence is there over the last number of years. So that's where the money comes from, and it doesn't just all go to the nominated team. They would have to accept as part of this that actually there's some sort of a split that goes to help raise all boats. Otherwise it is only one team. Otherwise, if it's Dundalk at the minute, they get all the money and they're uncatchable at some point 3 years later. So there has to be some sort of equity of feeding the money around. But go on.
Why do we have one nominated team when you can potentially invest in grassroots, ensure that the League of Ireland is going in a better direction than the direction it's been going in for the last decade and a half to 2 decades, encouraging a bit of foreign investment into the League of Ireland clubs and cultivating the direction in which a club like Dundalk is going towards? What's the end game here from your point of view?
The main reason for that, and there's a couple more points I want to touch on here in relation to the plan, because obviously I want to make it as watertight as I can on for our viewers. The main point of that is it just hasn't worked, right? So the objective of this is to get, it's a little bit of the Dundalk business plan. Get into Europe as much as you can and bring in the money, except for it's the league itself taking ownership of it rather than private entities.
I see what you're saying, and then after your 4-year cycle or whatever it's going to be as the team that is being cultivated by the League of Ireland, then it moves on to another team, and you'd hope that the legacy of that investment and that dedication and that care is going to lead to further results. Is that essentially your point?
It's not even to do with the legacy around that one team. It's just you're at that point talking about bringing in 3, 4, 5 million euro every year into the League of Ireland in a way that money doesn't exist at the minute. Like, there's a sustainability about it that's not always a handout approach. Like, what can the government give us? This is actually the league trying to help itself, and it's not like a one runaway team. Like I said, that boom bust culture that's been there over the last number of years.
But it sounds like it could become a runaway team. It sounds like that you're paying special attention to one particular element of the League of Ireland, and everything else could get left behind. That's the danger here. It also sounds quite confusing, I'm not going to lie.
You weren't paying attention to that. You've asked some questions there that have demonstrated on that you weren't paying attention.
You didn't demonstrate it that clearly, because I was listening very carefully, and you haven't made it abundantly clear.
Let me just cover off some of these other points, right? So the team that gets nominated can afford at that point, because they're getting some financial investment to bring in. I mentioned the unstructured natures of players wandering around the league, but they at that point can bring in the best 4 or 5 players in the country. And also post-Brexit, obviously some conversation about that this week, about some exceptional young talent from an under-18 point of view. Where do those players go? So could we, instead of those players going to the UK, the nominated club would get the pick of the best young talent in maybe some sort of a draft pick, which would obviously also offer benefits to other clubs as well. Like, it's a Celtic Rangers system, right? But by design of the league, and only one team. And I should say that 2 other major benefits as well would be the quality of player that's coming from the League of Ireland at that point would also feed into the national team. So there is that offshoot, and then suddenly a higher standard of player as well, that like the revenue stream that's coming from those younger players who will at some point go off to the Premier League, let's say, or to other European leagues at 19 or 20. They're going to get a higher premium for those players now, as opposed to the pittance that exists at the minute.
Can I just ask one last question, Adrian? Like, as an Athlone Town fan, like, this could be to the detriment of clubs that aren't in contention for the top 4 or 5 places in the League of Ireland Premier Division. What happens to them?
Well, it's a misnomer to think that there are 30 clubs that are in the running for the Premier Division for the League of Ireland anyway, to begin with. Like, what is it in any given year on is probably about 3 teams that have the capacity to actually win it. So
but
I don't think
it's not just about winning it. It's about their very existence. It's about them being cared about as much as Dundalk and St. Pat's and Shamrock Rovers. Like, what is the? It just seems that you are shoehorning off the very top clubs, the elite in the League of Ireland Premier Division, and everybody else gets a little bit forgotten about.
So that isn't the whole idea. If you're bringing in, for discussion's sake, let's say €5 million every year because of guaranteed European football in terms of getting to this level, this stage of Europe, and you have the structures in place to funnel that money outside of just the nominated club, well, then that's your opportunity. And also, like I said, there are other things there, like the post-Brexit situation with young players that are there with a draft system. The reality is, for a club like Athlone Town, it's barely surviving anyway. It is barely, they have barely managed to be able to put a team on the pitch to get thumped 11-0 by a team who aren't going to win the League of Ireland this year. So that's the reality anyway. But it's in bother. It's in serious bother anyway. So I would suggest that a plan like this would actually be should be of benefit. It needs to be structured in a way that's of benefit to clubs like Athlone Town.
It is a format that you probably couldn't write down on the back of an envelope, and Johnny Kennedy's been in touch to say it sounds as confusing as the Kerry Championship, which is a black mark against the simplicity of what you just brought to the table. But maybe we'll delve a little bit deeper into it later on. We'd love to hear your reaction to it. Tweet us at Off The Ball or comment on the YouTube stream as well. Phil Egan, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, how are you doing?
Oh, not too bad. Let me tell you before that, let's tell you what's coming up this morning on OTB AM. We do have Phil with his quick picks coming in just a moment. The sports page is then coming your way at 8 o'clock, and then Louise Galvin will be with us to look ahead to the weekend's GAA at 8:05. We've got Shane Hannon then at 8:35, keeping you up to speed on what's happening in the world of sport. Alan Quinlan at 20 to 9, and then that piece with Jim McGuinness and Kieran Donaghy is coming your way after 9 o'clock this morning. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Sorry, Phil, what's going on?
Well, we're talking Premier League, yeah?
We are. Let's start with the must-watch games this weekend. So we've got our must-watch games, our might-watch games, and our won't-watch games. So in our must-watch, first of all, I think the only place to start really is in the North London derby, Arsenal against Spurs this weekend. Do you give Arsenal any chance in this?
Well, not of winning, no. No, I think the best Arsenal can hope for this is a draw. I think it's going to be quite cagey because one thing you associate now with Mikel Arteta is trying to make his team solid. Now, I think when Arteta took over, obviously, ideally he wanted to play 4 at the back, but he probably realised soon enough that if you're going to put David Luiz as part of a two-man central defensive pairing, it's not going to work. So he went with 3. It was quite successful, obviously, won them the FA Cup. Now, for some reason, he's starting to veer away from that, but I don't think they're quite ready for that. And I know David Luiz was involved in that really nasty incident last weekend with Raúl Jiménez, and he shouldn't have stayed on the pitch. But before that all happened, he was still picked as one of 2, and it just doesn't work. David Luiz fits in fine into a 3-man central defence because, you know, he's a ball-playing centre-half. But if you've got 2 people keeping an eye on him, he's fine. But if it's just one other player, David Luiz is not the most trustworthy as a centre-half. And if you think of how good Spurs are at the moment, you'd seriously worry. But Jose Mourinho insists he's not playing mind games by saying Harry Kane wasn't available last night and might be available this weekend. But even if Harry Kane wasn't available, I'd still be leaning towards Spurs. But I think it's going to be quite cagey. And it's funny, though, if you think back to kind of around this time last year, Arteta was coming in and Mourinho had taken over at Spurs, and there was a lot of negativity around Mourinho and could he do it? But what a difference a year makes. Even what a difference a few months makes, where Arsenal obviously mentioned that they won the FA Cup and it was onwards and upwards for Arteta. They got a few decent players in, but they just can't score goals at the moment. And you know, the European wins are like all well and good, but they have to start winning. They're 14th in the Premier League. It's first against 14th. You could say form goes out the window because it's a derby, but I don't think it will.
I don't remember a North London derby ever being this favoured towards Spurs in my life. Like, there have been ups and downs for sure for both clubs, but in terms of, as you say, first versus 14th, I'm not sure has that ever happened in Spurs' favour in the Premier League era. Yeah,
I think even with Pochettino, when he was in charge and Spurs were at the peak of their powers, I think there was a few of those North London derbies where you feared for Arsenal going into it, but they somehow managed to get a performance out of it. I can actually remember, I know this game is in White Hart Lane or the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, whatever you want to call it, but I can remember a couple of years ago under Emery, Spurs went to the Emirates and everyone expected them to turn over Arsenal. Arsenal played one of their best games. This is when Alexis Sanchez was still an Arsenal player, and they beat them, and they basically did to Tottenham what Tottenham had been doing to teams, where they just outworked them and outplayed them. I can't see it happening though this weekend. I think Arsenal are just going to have to dig in and make themselves tough to beat, and who knows, they might be able to nick something on the break. Whether they can keep Spurs out, I wouldn't be so confident. Liverpool against Wolves is second up in your must-watch games. Why are you going for this one? Why is this an absolute must-watch in your view? Because we want to see how Quinlan Kelleher gets on in his Premier League debut. Obviously, there's a few things going on. You know, you've got fans back at Anfield. Liverpool are a patch-up job at the moment, but they're still getting results. I know they didn't win last weekend in the Premier League, but all the injuries they have, they're still joint top of the Premier League. They've qualified for the last 16 of the Champions League with a game to spare. So all is not as bad as it might seem, given all the players they're missing. Kelleher was excellent against Ajax, and Klopp explained afterwards why he picked him, because this is a guy that can play with the ball at his feet, and it sounds quite simple, but Adrian simply hasn't been able to do it. I keep talking about that Aston Villa game. Gives the ball away after a couple of minutes, a stray pass to Joe Gomez, Ollie Watkins takes it, it's 1-0, and Liverpool never really recovered from it. But also, you think back to the Atletico game, Adrian, his confidence just looked shot, so it was no surprise that Kelleher came in. But I suppose the most positive thing for Kelleher coming in was not only did he get the nod, but he also backed it up. And you know, this is going to be a big occasion for him as well, because it's a Premier League game at Anfield. There will be a few fans behind him in the Kop end as well. So big deal for Quinlan Kelleher. Also, Diogo Jota, who turns 24 today, blistering start to his Liverpool career, and you'd wonder what he wants to do against Wolves, because you know, a few eyebrows were raised when this signing was made. It was the same day that Thiago had signed for Liverpool, and this was the signing that got everyone excited. And Liverpool fans, I think, looked at Jota and thought, yeah, he's definitely better backup than somebody like Divock Origi. But is he going to challenge the front three? Well, he's done more than that. He's now that player that you have to fit him into the team. So there's plenty to look forward to. And obviously Wolves, great win against Arsenal last week, and worryingly for Liverpool, Adama Traore looked like he was kind of getting back to that menacing best that he is when he plays on the counter-attack.
Signing of the season, according to Michael Owen, Diogo Jota. They only paid 41 million for him. But on Kelleher, Phil, like obviously long live Alisson's dodgy hamstrings. But what happens? Alisson's only 28, Kelleher's 22, and without heaping the pressure on him, like he's going to be the Ireland keeper for the next 20 years. He needs to. What's he going to do? What's he going to do with his? Alisson could be the Liverpool keeper for another 5 or 6 years. He can't be hanging around for that, obviously.
Well, I don't think it does him any harm in the short term training alongside somebody like Alisson, because Alisson is like an unbelievable goalkeeper. Like Liverpool, when Klopp came in, obviously had Mignolet and Karius, and Mignolet hadn't worked out. Klopp went for Karius, went horribly wrong that night in Kiev, and then Alisson comes in, and it's no coincidence Liverpool have won the Champions League and the Premier League since Alisson has come in. Unfortunately for Liverpool, he is injury prone. He's picking up little injuries. So Kelleher, you can see, what we've seen of Kelleher so far, obviously the other night was the first time he's played in what you would consider the first team now, albeit with a few players missing, but not a Carabao Cup game or an FA Cup replay where you're playing basically in a second or third team and you don't get much protection. He was playing with the first team and he looked the part the other night. So I think there was talk of him going out on loan at the start of the season, but obviously Alisson got that injury, and I don't think Kelleher's going anywhere anytime soon. I think Adrian could be the one that is shipped out. I know Liverpool signed a young Brazilian goalkeeper as well. Alisson's brother had something to do with that deal as well. Came from the same club as Alisson, so he's only 17. This young keeper. So I think Kelleher's future still is very much at Liverpool.
And as backup to Alisson, he's going to get plenty of games a season. He doesn't necessarily need to go on loan to get up that experience. Phil, just 2 more games to touch on in the must-watch category. Sometimes you have these mid-table sides who are going extremely well and you expect them to really put it up to a big team, and then their challenge falls away almost immediately on the night. I think this is going to happen in both of these games at the weekend. West Ham against Manchester United and Chelsea against Leeds. West Ham and Leeds, both in a brilliant place. But something just tells me about these games that Chelsea and Manchester United are going to win with the cushion of a couple of goals. What do you reckon? Why are these must-watch?
Well, I think West Ham, a lot of people tipped David Moyes to be the first manager to be sacked, and obviously they were horrific the first night against Newcastle, and then you looked at their fixture list, but they've put in some unbelievable performances and they find themselves in 5th place, and he's made them very solid and got rid of the likes of Lanzini doesn't really get his game in there. Felipe Anderson, flair players. He's got lads that are willing to work from. They sit in. They play 3 at the back, and obviously Antonio is back as well. So very much a David Moyes looking team now. Something that you would have associated with his Everton side, where they're very hard to beat and more than capable of grinding out results. Now the problem for West Ham playing against Manchester United, as good as West Ham have been against United in the last couple of games, they're playing a United team that play their best games away from home. Even last weekend, 2-0 down to Southampton, they shouldn't have found themselves in that position because they had chances in the first half, but it was no surprise to see them come back. And yeah, I think just the way they play, I think this will suit United. And don't get me wrong, I don't think it's going to be an absolute stroll in the park. I think it's going to be one that they're going to have to work for. But United, one characteristic you have with United away from home this season is they finish games very well. The last 15 minutes is when they're getting their goals. Like they conceded first against Newcastle, they ended up winning that game 4-1. They obviously 2-0 down at half time last week. They come back, they win 3-2. So the late show is what you can expect from United away from home. Just on Chelsea Leeds, do Bielsa and Lampard still hate each other? I don't know. I think it's all good now because they're both in the Premier League and they're not duking it out for. They both won, basically. Yeah, absolutely. And it's obviously things are going very well for Chelsea at the moment. That was a very impressive result away to Sevilla. The fact that Sevilla don't concede many goals and Chelsea put 4 past them. And I suppose one question Frank Lampard's going to have to answer is, does he start Olivier Giroud? He hasn't started him in the Premier League this season. Very hard to leave out a guy that scores 4 goals, and obviously one of them was a penalty, but the hat-trick was so impressive. Now he's obviously gone with Tammy Abraham and Timo Werner in attack, so will he revert back to that? With Leeds, I've said it, Leeds are always must-watch. We know how they're going to play. Some weeks it's going to work, some weeks it won't. Last week it worked against Everton. They create plenty of chances. I'd imagine if you're a Leeds fan, it's thrilling to watch, but at the same time frustrating, because they create so many chances but they don't put enough away. But certainly this would be a good test for Chelsea, because obviously Spurs went to Stamford Bridge last weekend, and it was clear after about 20 minutes Chelsea were fearful that they could get caught out by the way Spurs countered them. So the game kind of petered out after a fairly good opening 20 minutes. It was quite clear that neither team wanted to lose that game, but Chelsea be certainly looking to win this game. I think it'll be a very good game. There's not many Leeds games that are dull.
Your might watch list is Burnley versus Everton, Sheffield United versus Leicester, and Brighton against Southampton. And your won't watch is West Brom against Crystal Palace, because it's West Brom against Crystal Palace. And Manchester City against Fulham. Is that because you think City are just going to smash them?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much Manchester City, just replace Burnley with Fulham, and that's kind of the afternoon you're going to get, where as impressive as Fulham were away to Leicester last Monday, and they played them at the counter-attack, City have better attacking players in terms of more intricate attacking players than Leicester. Leicester do their best work on the counter-attack, whereas City are going to love having the ball against Fulham, and Fulham saying, can you pick us off? And of course they will, and they'll probably be 2-0 up after about 20 minutes. So. And
Dundalk Rovers must watch as well?
Absolutely, yeah. You kind of favour Rovers. Dundalk had their moments last night, but again, a bit of a worry. I know it was something that they picked up on in the Virgin Media coverage, was just the way they're defending set pieces. So that's certainly something that Shamrock Rovers will be looking at. But Rovers have had the upper hand on Dundalk this season, so they'll obviously fancy their chances. Yeah, it's a 6:40 kickoff. Which, can somebody explain that one to me?
Phil Egan.
Wouldn't happen in my new plan, Phil.
That's it.
I mean, I don't even know where to start with that, Adrian. I was honestly.
You're having it, Phil.
It was very early for me. I was going.
Same.
Yeah. Maybe I need to wake up.
Phil, the short story is you're going to see more League of Ireland teams playing in Europe every single year.
Phil,
what's not to love?
Phil needs to go do the day job. He's going to end up missing it to listen to your plan again. Phil Egan, thanks a million for joining us. It is 7:58 on this Friday morning. A packed show still to come. Alan Quinlan's going to join us later. We've got Kieran Donaghy in conversation with Jim McGuinness, and we're back with Louise Galvin next, looking ahead to the weekend's All-Ireland semi-finals. But keep an eye out here in this ad break for the latest episode of the Bernard Brogan podcast. Shane Lowry was our special guest.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
Bronny Whelan could play, by the way. And let me tell you, talk about people being dirty when you could tackle. He was filthy.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Dear me.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Wednesday afternoon I went out to play a few holes with GMAC, and I think we played about 7 or 8 holes, and I felt like I was playing awful. Like I was kind of we call it like a major meltdown. We always, you always go through it the week of a major. You have a bit of a head off and a bit of a bitch and moan to your coach, but it's kind of good to have that. I almost, on the other hand, I almost dislike when I'm feeling really good about my game going into it, because then my expectation higher, and I feel like I'm I get into that kind of complacent mode where I'm expecting to go out and shoot a good score, whereas when I'm a bit anxious is when I'm at my best, because it kind of focuses me in more on targets and what my job is. But as regards preparation, how I did it, I didn't do it. I don't think I did it any different than any other week. It just so happened that I went out there and played the golf of my life, and I knew I could go there under the radar, try and shoot a couple of decent scores, and before I knew it, I was leading the tournament on Friday, and then I kind of never looked back after that. I kicked on for the rest of the weekend, and But when I look back on it, for about 3 months beforehand, I was probably playing the golf of my life, and I just hadn't had the perfect results. But I was very fortunate that the perfect result happened that weekend. Because the way I look at it in golf, right, and this is the way I look at it. This is the way I look at golf. For me, like people, the top players, the top 5 in the world, say the Rorys and Dustins and these guys, they try and peak their games for majors, but I don't think personally that I can do that. I just think that I need to just go out and be the best I can be on any given day, and I just have to be fortunate when it happens, because, and I said this after the Masters, you look at Dustin Johnson shooting 20 under around there for 4 rounds and, winning by loads. I think I said it afterwards, and I've no bother saying this. If I went out there and brought my A game and played as best I could and got every break I could, I couldn't have beaten Dustin Johnson that week, because that's just the way it is. He's a better golfer than me. He's the world number 1, and I'm not saying that when I get put in the back 9 on Sunday against him, if we're tied for the lead, that I can't beat him. I know I can, but the fact that he brings his A game, I don't think the best golfer, the top 2 or 3, him and Rory, I would put there. Maybe a couple of others that if they bring their A game, they can't be beaten.
Into sports.
20 yards out, Ursh to shoot. Johnson! Oh, what a goal from Fabinho! Wow!
Then get into the all-new OTB Sports app.
I think when he apologises to me, I probably will say hello to him, yeah. No.
Videos, sports news, live scores, interviews.
If Fabregas is going to come up to me in the street and give me some of the mouth that he would have given me on a football pitch, what do we get a slap?
Plus, exclusive content on the OTB Podcast Network. The biggest names in sports. Ready when you are. Search OTB Sports on your app store and download it now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, your most supported our frontline workers this Movember.
You're welcome back. It is 2 minutes past 8, and you'll have seen there Shane Lowry in the ad break. He was our special guest on episode 3 of the Bernard Brogan podcast, which is brought to you with thanks to SuperValu, proud sponsors of the 2020 All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. See youtube.com/SuperValu Ireland for more. You'll get the first 3 episodes in the OTB GEA podcast stream, and we've got a brilliant hour-long special with Jack McCaffrey coming up next Wednesday. So subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. #support where you're from. Right, we are turning our attention to the weekend's football semi-finals in the women's football and the men's football, and delighted to say that Louise Galvin is with us. Good morning, Louise.
Morning, Eoin. How's things?
Very well, thanks. So let's kick things off with Mayo against Tip. It is on Sunday. It is the biggest chance we have this weekend of an upset. Stephen Rochford this week has said that Tipperary have an over-dependence on Sweeney and Quinlan up front. Is stopping those 2 men what the chances of an upset will boil down to on Sunday?
Yeah, I think if you look back at the scoring charts for the last 2 games, they've certainly been the primary score getters for Tip. So it is hugely important for Tip, if they're going to get a win, that they get a little bit more of a contribution from play from the likes of the Kennedys. Brian Fox, I know he came along and scored a massive score against Limerick in that Munster semi-final. But it's hugely important that they're getting a little bit of help, because there's no way Mayo are going to let Quinlan and Sweeney completely dictate this game and Tip come on out the other side of a win. Having said that, it is up to Mayo to try and stop them as well, because they're 2 incredible footballers. They're enjoying their football. We've seen the Munster final how even the little smiles after the game or after the point kicking of Quinlan, and saw Sweeney after the game. I thought it was one of the most composed interviews of a captain, considering he just captained his team to winning a provincial final for the first time in 85 years, and the whole emotion of Bloody Sunday and that. But it was a wonderfully composed interview. So it just shows these guys, they're pretty special footballers, but absolutely, on one hand, Mayo need to stop them. On the other hand, Tip need to look at giving them a bit more support on the scoring chart, certainly.
That's the thing about their temperament. It does seem that these are the type of players who aren't going to be fazed by the fact that they were in an All-Ireland semi-final. I know that the lack of a crowd will probably take that out of it anyway, but the sense of occasion doesn't seem like it's going to get under the skin of these players.
Yeah, and the lack of the crowd is an interesting one, Owen, because I actually see James Horan mentioned this week that he thinks that'll suit Mayo as well. So it seems out of all the teams probably this weekend, Dublin are probably the only ones that are not bothered by a crowd being there or not. And it's something Kate Kirby's well-renowned sports psychologist, she mentioned this week that it could be one of the reasons why this is like the year of the upset for Gaelic games, and even, you know, someone like Waterford, a county in hurling who get into an All-Ireland hurling final, where again crowd, the support they'd have would normally be going mad. Even the whole lockdown, lack of flags, lack of, press nights, I think it's suiting these underdog teams. So certainly with Tip, I think they're a bunch of lads. They nearly look like they enjoy playing ball. They kind of play to the standard they're at. There's a lot of talking about them obviously being Division 3 team, but again, they're, they stepped up to the plate when they were playing Cork on Munster final day. They just seem to be kind of like an old school team where maybe that long 11-month season, 10-month intercount season doesn't maybe particularly suit them to keep their eye on the ball, but this shorter 7-8 week season is actually the type of structure that suits them a lot better, because they certainly have the footballers, they have the talent. We've seen them, a lot of these guys win a minor All-Irelands or minor All-Ireland in 2011 under David Power. There's just a lot going right for them at the moment.
That point that James Horan is making about performance anxiety, like that is something that we've seen replicated, as you mentioned there, the underdog, in a multitude of sports. Like the crazy results we saw at the start of this season in the Premier League probably is down to a lot to do with the fact that there was no crowds in these stadiums. And like, do you subscribe to the school of thought that Mayo definitely were affected over the last few years, especially in 16 and 17, by a full Croke Park, the sense in the stadium that, hold on a minute, we're actually going to beat Dublin, and that kind of got under them a little bit and it did hold them back. Do you feel that that's out of the picture now if they do manage to get over the line this weekend?
Yeah, it's something I didn't think coming into this game would affect Mayo or would be a positive for Mayo as well as Tipperary. It was only James Horan's comments that kind of highlighted that, and he nearly described the almost sense of a groan of anxiety when Andy Moran, I think, scored a goal against Dublin, which is incredible. Thank you. Normally that's an opportunity for your supporters to get behind you, but it was nearly a sense of, here we go again, we have this false sense of hope. Which, look, I don't know. I mean, if that's a bit of performance anxiety for the coach as well. It's a difficult one. I don't think it even just comes down to the game, the crowd. I think it's the whole society that we're living in at the moment, because even if you took the crowd out of it, but we were normally out socialising, meeting people, crowds outside training, press nights, I think all that has been taken away. And that's what's helping the underdogs. It's not just even the game day itself. But yeah,
there's no hype, Louise. Like it's a weird one, isn't there?
Yeah, it is strange, and it is disappointing, because when you look back at it, like let's say these guys, the Tip guys, the Cam guys, if they don't progress beyond the semi-final and if they don't reach an All-Ireland semi-final again for another number of years, the positive memories they would have been the build-up to the game, because the game itself might not, if it does end in defeat, might not, obviously won't hold those positive memories, but they'll have the build-up, the excitement, the chatting to the club men, the family, all those different things that they're not having now. But at the same time, it might be something that actually helps them get over the line and help them prepare for an All-Ireland final, which is way more important at the end of the day. I know as a competitive athlete, I prefer to maximise my chance of getting into the final or getting that win rather than enjoy the build-up and, having a close defeat.
You assume, Louise, that it's going to be a more competitive game than the match over on the other side, obviously. But at the same time, if you look at what Mayo have done so far, right, beating Leitrim, beating the bang average on the day, Roscommon, and then obviously Galway by a point. Are we talking Mayo up too much?
I think there's still a lot of question marks over this Mayo team. What's going right from the moment is, I suppose, the form of players like Cillian O'Connor, Paddy Durkin, who are just super, super footballers and have performed on the big stage, and you can put your house in them that they're going to put in a performance again as well on Sunday. But when you look at the 21 players I think they used against Dublin last year, 9 are starting this weekend. So they have a lot of unproven players at this level as well. Now, having said that, that could be a sign of they've looked at their county championship and they're going, look, we're picking on form, we're blending a bit of youth and experience. And again, in a shortened championship, maybe that's form is a bit more important than previous years where experience building up to semi-final, the whole pressure that goes with that, maybe a bit of experience can trump a young form player. So maybe it's a smarter decision. But yeah, there's a lot of players that are still unproven at this level. At the same time, I mean, you can't be but excited at the sight of an Eoin McLaughlin and Oisín Gallen rushing out of defence. Like the speed endurance of these guys and the incessant, I suppose, want and desire of them to attack at all times mean that Tipperary, they can't just sit back either. They really need to go and make sure the ball is being stuck down the other end of the field. think one way they might do that is to obviously go a bit long on their kickouts, because I think like there was a stat in the Times this week about the amount of turnovers that Mayo are getting, and it's actually starting with their full forward line. Their full forward line have more turnovers than any other line. So if Tip are going to go short, which they haven't done, I mean, they've a lot of ball winners around the middle of the field, ably assisted obviously by Colin Adrian coming in and top of Casey and O'Brien. I think they'll look to go long, because at least then if they turn over the ball, if they win the midfield battle, turn over the ball a little bit further up into the lines, they can get a little bit of protection back to try and stem the tide of these onrushing Mayo defenders who just want to attack at pace.
That piece by Eoin Donoghue is definitely worth digging out, illustrating how Mayo were almost like Liverpool in the sense that their attackers are so dangerous without the ball that they turn you over and it's a score, obviously. The thing, though, is that this kind of plays into a Tipperary advantage, that if there's one team still alive in the Championship who perhaps are actually better going long from their kick-out, it is Tipperary. In that middle third, in midfield in particular, they're very strong.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think they more than capably beat Cork in that area of the field as well. And then automatically that gives you your supply to your marquee inside forwards. So certainly that might influence how Mayo play the game, because if you have Conor Loftus, who by all accounts only started playing midfield for Crossmolina this year in the club championship, if you have Conor Loftus and he's struggling there along with Matthew Ann, who's a brilliant midfielder, then you're starting to bring out Aidan O'Shea, which suddenly might change the I suppose the point of their attack and the whole they've obviously had him in full forward all year, so are you now taking away from what you're working on just to make sure you secure primary possession against a very strong midfield for Tipperary? So there's a lot to play out. I mean, if they are struggling to win that ball, I mean, it's either you bring in a Tom Parsons or a Shane O'Shea to try and win that midfield ball, or you start to pull out an Aidan O'Shea, which obviously it all has a knock-on effect somewhere else up the field. Having said that, if Mayo do get a bit of a stranglehold in this game, if they do start creating those turnovers, certainly around the middle third, and they just start to bomb forward, then it's going to be dangerous for Tipperary to try and stem that tide, because they probably have a bit more of a spread of scoring than Tip do, relying on the likes of Sweeney and Quinlan.
On the point of the turnovers, Louise, Stephen Rochford was saying to the Examiner today that Mayo have been doing some basketball work, and obviously you've one of the many sports that you played to an incredibly high level yourself, so you know a thing or two about that. But he's talking about like shutting them down that way and obviously turning them up blind alleys and stuff like that. It's something that I'm sure Tip will be conscious of, but how do you plan or how do you plot to get around a press like that, even though you might be expecting it?
Yeah, like I think it's obviously not the first team not the first county to turn to basketball or another sport, which is a sign of just constantly looking for those extra 1 or 2 percentages. But yeah, look, you're trying to get off the tram lines. I mean, and I think Dublin are the primary example of this. Like, they'll try and run you down the tram line and make it look like you have an avenue in front of you and use the sideline as an extra defender, and you could run 40, 50 yards, but actually you're in no better position. So I think try and get off the tram lines, try and get into the middle of the field, try and give yourself two sides of attacks is really important. And then angles is the other way that I suppose a lot of basketball teams will defend. They'll try and use like a 3-point system where a defender always has an eye on the ball and an eye on that you're always in a triangle between the player you're marking and where the ball is. So it's like the best way to, I suppose, attack that is get in off the tram lines, get yourself to have two sides of attack, and then just try and move the ball as much as possible. So the ball is the focal point of the attack. If you don't want to carry the ball 40, 50 yards, because it might look like you're making advancements, but actually you're cutting off your opportunity. And I think that's another reason why maybe Aidan O'Shea being inside can be a positive thing for Mayo, because he's a phenomenal footballer. But I think for years, Aidan carried the ball and actually slowed down the Mayo attack because he was so strong at it. He became a focal point for opposition defenders to try and come and have a hop off him. Yeah, he might get past 2 or 3 players, but actually I think he was just slowing down the attack and allowing the rest of the defence to go back and cut off options. And if he didn't get a free in possession, oftentimes it was a case of recycling and starting their attack again. So you just need to keep the ball moving. I think one player, unless it's opened up in front of you, one player carrying unless it's an incredible speed at a Jack McCaffrey or a Paddy Durkin, actually getting ahead of players. If you're on a tram line and you're just carrying the ball along, or you're just in the middle of the field but hopping off players, 2 or 3 players, and slowing the game down, it's actually not that advantageous for your team the way other teams are defending these days.
Are you ultimately thinking Mayo?
You would expect it, but I do think it's going to be closer than the other semi-final. And I think, again, how matchups are important. So, like, whether it's Chris Barrett picking up Conor Sweeney, maybe a bit of a height advantage there. Where Quinlan will go, will he drift in and out a little bit? The matchups are going to be hugely important, particularly for those 2 players. But you know, if it's, again, coming out of that third quarter, it's a bit of a basketball analogy, but that's the way we have with the water breaks. If Tip are thereabouts, God, I certainly wouldn't be writing them off.
No, it should be a cracker. The other one then, Dublin against Cavan tomorrow night in Croke Park, Louise. One of the questions I would have about this Dublin team is how on earth they managed to keep bringing such a high level of performance given their favourites tag. How it just seems so effortless for them to reach an unbelievably high level every single time of asking. There isn't a blemish on the record every time they come out and they show up against, whether it's Meath, whether it's any other team in Leinster, whether it's a quarter-finalist that comes from Ulster, or in this year, a semi-finalist that's coming from Ulster. Can you pin down why that is?
They're just super impressive. But what they seem to have created is this incredible culture of, number one, it's the team. It's not about who scores, it's about the team getting over the line. So you'll see so many of their goals, like it's just someone coming across and they could shoot, they'll just lay it off, hand pass, and Dean Rock or whoever will slip it in. Within that then, though, they have incredible competition for places, but that competition isn't based off you're going to come off the bench and score 1-2 even as an inside forward. Whatever way they've done their analysis, whatever way they have it, they have players itching to get on the field to play, but the goals are very much team goal orientated, whether you're a cornerback or a corner forward. And that's what I always think about Dublin. They're not selfish. They've clutch players who know, yeah, I'm a score getter. I'm gonna go and put my head down and go for goal. The likes of Kevin McManaman over the years coming on, he knows his role is bomb ahead. But it's always with a team focus and a team outlook. They don't have selfish players. So however they have created that culture, whether it started even before Jim Gavin or when he first came in, I think that's the most important thing, because it keeps the competition within the squad and it keeps everyone focused on the same goal. Like, guys aren't coming on just to score, because that's not going to be enough, or just to stop their man. That's not going to be enough to keep them even within the 26 probably for the next day. It's so team orientated. And again, since the Leinster final, we've barely heard a word out of camp. Like, they just do all their talking on the field. It's so boring nearly how effortlessly professional they are. You could not dig up a bit of dirt. You couldn't dig up, a bit of a comment saying, "Oh, this guy said this here now. Can we take an angle on that?" They're just such consummate professionals. And then they have a few Rolls Royce of footballers that, they're generationally, they're just superb. Like the likes of Brian Fenton, you could just watch them all day gliding all over the field. Stephen Cluxton, again, like Meath press up, and then he just picks out Conor Callan for a few of those kickouts down the centre of the field. It's just boring, isn't it? But also, it's so admirable. It's so admirable.
I'd be keen to get your take on, if you were Dessie Farrell, what sort of team you'd pick this weekend. You might just focus on the forwards this morning. The 6 forwards they started against Meath were Scully, Kilkenny, Bugler, Small, that's Paddy Small obviously, Conor Callaghan and Dean Rock. Mannion, Costello, Howard came off the bench. Are you sticking with the same that went against Meath? As you say, there's a very specific plan they have for every team they come up against, and it's not necessarily just squad depth or a pecking order. It's a very specific 6 that they always pick. Are you sticking with that, or do Mannion, Costello, Howard, does one or a couple of those 3 come in?
But I'm not sure Costello will be rewarded for having to put their delegates and their administrators through a CCC or whatever it is. So I'm not sure he's going to be rewarded for that. But of all of those, I actually think that Howard probably might have the biggest, I suppose, push for a starting spot, purely because, again, Cavan are particularly strong around that kind of middle 8. And I know, again, Eoin, you mentioned like the 6 forwards, but as we know, it's so not a 6 forward, 6 backs game. So it completely depends on what way. Like if you have Scully has become he's almost become like he came slightly after Howard, but actually has become that Howard role, or that typical almost Paul Flynn role of like the modern day half forward who's tracking back, coming forward, everything going through them, and gets on the odd score at the end of the pitch as well. But I think because of Howard, like he's an incredible area leap. He actually played a lot really in midfield, I feel, last year, particularly in that final and final replay. I think if they're struggling to win primary possession around that middle half, and I mean struggling in Dublin terms, which usually isn't a massive struggle either, you could see Brian Howard maybe staking a claim to push to start maybe ahead of Lahif or ahead of a Bugler if they're thinking that they need a bit more size rather than pure attacking threat. Having said that, like you say, it's not that Bugler has done anything wrong. If he was to be dropped, it's a horses for courses sort of a situation.
Is there, if you talk about this in a realistic sense, what is the best outcome for Cavan this weekend in your view?
Probably if they can stay within 5 or 6 points. I think that'd be huge for them. Having said that, look, they came in being told if they stay within 5 or 6 points of Donegal that it wouldn't be a bad outcome either. And like Mickey Graham, he obviously has the bit of a Midas touch of having these kind of underdog teams and just instilling such incredible belief for them. The other thing is, if they go behind, they're not going to drop the heads at them either. Maybe some of the other teams that are used to playing Dublin, and they haven't played Dublin in so long to have that sense of, we're 5 or 6 points behind now. It's done. It's dead in the water. They might have seen it obviously with other squads, but they're a sort of team that dig in. So I don't see, if they do tend to go down early in the game, I don't see it necessarily turning into game over, 10, 12, 15 point drubbing. I think they'll stick with it because they're incredibly dogged. But it is very difficult to see where they're going to win this game. At the same time, I keep telling myself, sometime this Dublin team are going to lose. They're going to have to lose. And maybe an All-Ireland semi-final in the current structure without a quarter-final is the place it's going to happen, because I don't think anyone in Leinster has the belief or the players to topple them. And I think if you get them in an All-Ireland final stage, they're just so incredibly focused that if you are going to catch them on the hop or catch them on one of those days where just a few key players aren't up to scratch, aren't up to song, maybe they're like, I do think Dublin's rear guard aren't as strong as their middle third and their forwards. And we've seen last year, obviously, the likes of Johnny Cooper can get him into a bit of trouble with ref. Like if you can get something, a black card early, I see the likes of John Small maybe going to Garrod McKiernan if one or two of them pick up a bit of black card. The fact that that's now more a sin bin rather than a replacement might give Cavan a little bit of a chance. And they're the type of team, like they've suffered 2 black cards in that Ulster final, contentious enough ones, and they still dug it out. So if we can get, Brian Fenton off guard, off song, and Kieran Kilkenny pulling a few shots wide, maybe black carded too, maybe then it could be Cavan's day, because if it's going to happen, I think it's going to be semi-final. Yeah. Or out of Leinster, but before a final.
Yeah, it's a good shout. It'll be, I think what we're all hoping for is maybe something that's a single point difference between the teams, which will be a success given everything we've seen in recent months. Let's talk about Cork against Galway. It's a 1:30 throw-in on Sunday. The big theme around this has been the moving of the fixture from the Gaelic grounds in Limerick to Parnell Park because of the Limerick hurlers training in the Gaelic grounds. What's your take on that whole situation?
My first take on is that I hate this with ladies sports. The first thing we talk about is something nothing to do with the game. And Jeannie Mac, when that day ends, I'll be a happy woman. But seeing as you asked me about it anyway, and you're right, if you ask most people, most of the general sports followers, this is what they'll know about that game. Yeah. Look, Limerick own the ground. This is, if you go back to the original, the original problems, ladies sport, camogie, ladies football, we don't own grounds, so we're always relying on, I suppose, the generosity of the GA. And Limerick, they said, they clearly stated, I mean, who are we to come up against a John Kiley and say, no, we actually want that ground. Look, they're doing what they feel they need to do. And then there's a question about lights, which meant it went to Dublin. But it does seem a bit ridiculous that there wasn't another that there wasn't another way of solving this than bringing Galway and Cork, who would have a lot of players come from Bantry and Skibben, these places, all the way up to Parnell Park, which means they're then in the middle of a pandemic coming the night before because it's a half-one throw in. It is a little bit ridiculous, but this is part of the problem. I see last night there's been talk of the WGPA and the GPA joining up forces, and it might lead to some of these issues not arising hopefully in the future. But to get onto the game itself, I think going to be a good game. We saw a cracker against Dublin Armagh. I hope you saw it last weekend. It was a brilliant game of football. I hope this weekend will live up to it as well. I think Galway have not hit the heights of probably their All-Ireland semi-final last year was when they last put in a particularly good performance. I think the final last year was a bit of a disaster, notwithstanding the weather conditions, and Galway didn't particularly perform either, which is a pity because Dublin didn't perform, and it was definitely there for the taking. But they have won their 2 group games just by a point, very tight group with Monaghan and Tipperary, and in both those games they were ahead and let the squad back into it. Contrast that with Cork hadn't had any games before they played a Kerry team who were high in confidence after beating Cavan, played them down in Tree, and a very professional performance. Again, they get ahead and then they just close the game out. What Cork have at the moment as well is an incredible goal getter in Saoirse Noonan, who also ended up playing with Cork City and called into the women's national squad over the course of the last few months. And they just have an incredible ability to grind out these results. They still have a lot of links to kind of their very dominant squads, particularly the likes of Roisin Phelan and the Sullivan sisters. So unless Galway can really discover a little bit of form, I think this is going to be a Cork win.
The last meeting in Championship was an absolute mauling in favour of Cork. 2017, they scored 6 goals against Galway in that particular fixture. How much have Galway come on in the intervening 3 years, and are they a proper All-Ireland contender in your view, or is it very hard to look every single year past Cork and Dublin at this point?
Yeah, I think even in 2017 we were coming really to the... Cork were in a slight transition stage, but they were still in a strong position than they probably have been the last 2 years. I think with Galway, what happened last year, they got to the All-Ireland semi-final. They played Mayo, who they play obviously annually, and they've a real rival and battle with them, and they come out on top. But I think when they then come to the likes of playing at Dublin and a Cork, they're probably just a little bit off the mark, because that All-Ireland final last year was there for the taking. It was a difficult game, difficult conditions, but neither team... It was such a disappointment because I think ladies football has come on leaps and bounds, and some of the skill level and the conditioning is off the charts, and it wasn't really reflected in the All-Ireland final last year. So Galway would have been disappointed themselves, the performance, but even, coming into the league games this year, the round-robin games, they just haven't hit the same heights. Having said that, they're 60 minutes away from getting back into an All-Ireland final that they feel that had left a lot behind them last year. So I wouldn't write them off. It's difficult this year. I mean, ladies football, they didn't end up finishing the league, and they all just played 2 round-robin games. So again, we're going off a little bit of wondering where teams are at, what form they have. Galway as well are missing Roisin Leonard, who's out injured, who would be a real talismanic forward for them. So on the balance of things, I'd have to go with Cork, because again, seeing them play that game down in Tralee, they still just have that ability to just grind games out if they get their nose ahead. They're just a real kind of professional outfit from that point of view, and I think they've enough stability at the back and firepower up front to trouble Galway. I also think this whole fixture thing, Eoin Fitzgerald, I think he'll use it a little bit to add a little bit of fire to his squad. And they'll certainly be eyeing up Dublin that final. Yeah,
he's not a happy man this week. Louise Galvin, great stuff as ever. Thanks a million for taking the call.
Thanks, guys.
Right, it is 29 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning, and it is a massive weekend in the 2020 GAA All-Ireland Senior Football Championships. We're at the semi-final stage, and to celebrate, Super Value, as part of their Support Where You're From campaign, have given us some great prizes to give away. We want you to dig out your favourite ticket stub, match programme jersey, photo with your hero, any GAA-related item basically you've been dying to tell the country about. Make a 20-second video explaining its significance. Get them into us on any OTB social channel you like, or on WhatsApp to 0879 180 180. We'll choose a winner every Friday during the championship. Each weekly winner lands a €200 voucher for a Super Value near you, and also the chance to star in Super Value's Super Fan series, a fly-on-the-wall peek inside the homes of dedicated supporters around the country. Super Value are proud sponsors of the GEA Football All-Ireland Senior Championships. See youtube.com/Super Value Ireland for more details. It is time for our quick picks. Will O'Callaghan, Tommy Rooney, good morning.
Morning, lads. How are things?
Right, let's just get this out of the way first off. Let's see our scores. Will O'Callaghan, as ever, top of the table. Pains me to say it. 30 correct picks, Will. I hope you're happy. Fair play. Adrian, 28 and 12. Myself, 27 and 13. Tommy, 26 and 14. It means basically, Tommy, you can't catch Will. Well, sorry, you can if you get all your 4 correct, because there are only 4 remaining games between hurling and football this year. So this is it. Time is running out on you, Tommy.
Yeah, I'm not saying to change the rules here, Eoin, but I think we need to bring a bit of jeopardy into it when it comes to the All-Ireland final. So just to keep a bit of interest going. Well, I'm not sure I can let you set the table for the All-Ireland finals. Fair enough, you may walk it. It's been a fine line all year long. Personally, I still think I've had some of the best calls. Will's been picking favourites along the way. Fair enough, I've had some bad calls as well, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I guess the temptation is here now at the moment, Tommy, is to actually just back favourites across the remaining 4 fixtures that we have and just see it out from here. So I think unless the Dublin footballers suffer the shock defeat of all shock defeats this weekend, I think I probably just have, there's enough road running out at this point that I should be able to just about get over the line. Some breaking news in the last few minutes as well, by the way. At least you've just appointed Seamus Cheddar Plunkett as their new hurling manager literally in the last 30 seconds. So right. I think he was due to take over my club Burr next year. That stalled last weekend, and Cheddar Plunkett is back in now as Laois manager, and he's going to succeed Eddie Brennan, who is a coach at Coola. So the management merry-go-round is going around this morning.
That'll be well received, will it?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, obviously, Cheddar was extremely popular when he came in, effectively firefighting before. When he was actually on a selection committee and ended up becoming the manager, such was the lack of interest at the point that Laois had fallen to when Cheddar Plunkett took over. They then had a big win over Offaly in the Leinster Championship. He made Laois very competitive. They were unlucky not to get a qualifier win against Clare. Had a very good performance against Galway under Cheddar Plunkett too. And then he had a kind of a sweeping plan where he wanted to come in and push up standards within Laois. Couldn't find an arrangement with the county board at the time and stepped away 3 seasons ago. And then Eamon Kelly came in for a season, and since then Eddie Brennan has come in. I think there's definitely an improvement within the Laois camp in the period since, particularly since Eddie Brennan, Niall Corcoran and Tommy Fitzgerald would have taken over 2 years ago. Had that big win against Dublin in the championship in the summer of 2019. Retained their Division 1 status in the year just gone. They'll be in the Leinster Senior next year. And they've got Cheddar, a real kind of beloved hurling man within Laois, back in charge of them for the 2021 season.
Let's have a look at this week's quick picks. We've got Cavan against Dublin and we've got Mayo against Tipperary. So no surprise to anybody that it's 4 Dublin picks out of 4 of us basically, and then Mayo against Tip. Tommy Rooney, you've been flying the flag for Tipperary all year long. You've said that they were going to beat Cork in the Munster final. You were right. You flew the flag wrongly in the hurling, I think, as well at this point. But you're sticking with your blue and yellow colours. Why do you think Tipperary can do it this weekend?
I need them to do it. That's probably one of the reasons. But I do genuinely believe there's a case to be made here for Tipperary, and it's not talking down Mayo. It's probably just giving more kudos to the quality that's in that Tipperary team. They've got a lot of their boys back. We know O'Riordan's back. Stephen O'Brien is back playing with the footballers this year, and he's another monster in the middle of the field. Mayo's strength has always been around the likes of Keegan and O'Shea and O'Connor, but look at the impact that Paddy Durkin has had in the last 18 months, 2 years as a leader, and look at the younger lads that have come through. So obviously Mayo have strengthened a lot. I would say Mayo are probably better than they were in the last time these two met in the All-Ireland semi-final. But back then,
which Mayo won? How can you possibly use that logic to Tipperary?
Because I think Tipperary were very unlucky that day. They got a black card to Robbie Kiley very early on, and I think Tipperary probably showed that they had a bit of class that day. And Tipperary are better than they were back then as well. I think Quinlan's a better footballer. I think Sweeney's a better footballer. And I think there's a very good chance that Tipperary could upset the odds this weekend. And I also need them to do it. Like, I'm not lying, lads. Don't be he'll be back in Tipperary because of what I'm saying here. But there is a good case to be made that they're as strong or stronger in midfield. And if it clicks up front, and if Mayo have a Mayor up front, well, then it's going to be Tip's day.
Will basically is Jonathan Walters with the ball at the corner flag, trying to stop anybody getting in here. Tommy, you're going for the juggler here, going in 2-footed. Adrian, why are you not going for it? Why are you not going for Cavan and Tip this weekend?
I'm hoping Will is more of a Marvin Fellaini, to be honest with you, but look, we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. There's a huge case to be made for Tipperary, isn't there? And like on the basis of, I tell you my logic going right, on the basis of like trying to win the competition outright, as we sit here now, I think the best thing, the easiest thing to do, the handiest thing, the most predictable thing is to do what Tommy's doing and go for Tipperary and back against Will. But like I go on the logic that you have to put out your strongest team until the final weekend of the season, and the coefficient might go against you. So you got to get your strongest team out until the end of the season. That's why I'm going. You got to go with your hunch on these things. I think there is obviously a very strong case to be made for Tipperary. Like nobody's going to be entirely surprised by it. The question we were talking to Louise Galvin about earlier on, are Mayo overhyped? I think they probably are, to be honest. Like I think that you could look back in 2020 and say they beat Leitrim, a bad Roscommon team, squeeze past Galway and beat Tipperary in semi-final, and have suddenly landed themselves in it's a handy, that is, I don't care what way you look at it, it's a handy final, which they'd still end up getting fairly well beaten in, I think. But there's a case to be made for Tipperary here, but I'm going with edging for Mayo.
The only team that haven't had a handy route to this stage really is Cavan, Adrian. If you're going to use that logic, I mean,
I don't agree with that, because I don't agree with that all on the basis that like none of us tipped Tipperary to beat Cork, so I don't.
Excuse me. Hello. Excuse me.
Apart from Tommy, yeah.
Well, if Mayo had the run that Tip had, or they had the run that Dublin had, you would be saying similarly that they're overhyped because they've had an easy run. Like, I mean, with no backdoor, with no Super 8s, people get to the semi-finals with an easier run because straight to the semi-finals after the provincial. I think beating Roscommon, who are a Division 1 team next year, beating Galway, who are a Division 1 team next year.
No, but Tipperary are in this position that nobody expected them to be in, whereas you kind of expected of Mayo, right? Like
I just think it's unfair to judge them on the route that they've had. I think that they've had to beat two quality sides on the way to an All-Ireland semi-final, coming out of Connacht any year, beating two divisions.
But in a typical year, Eoin, right? They might end up in a typical year for Mayo over the last 5 years. They might get beaten in a Connacht semi-final, let's say, and you end up playing Galway again, you end up playing Donegal, you end up in a hard semi-final against Tyrone. Like it's not, you can't say it's the same level. You have to say that it would be a handy final if they got there.
Will, why did you avoid the temptation to tip Tipperary?
Yeah, I was watching Declan Brown, the Tipperary legend, on the Super Valley Roadshow last night, and he made a very fair point, which is that this might be Tipperary's best ever opportunity to get to an All-Ireland final, because realistically, Michael Quinlan is already talking about potentially taking some time out. Colin O'Riordan is going to be back with the Sydney Swans, and this might be this kind of one-off occasion where the best players from their All-Ireland under-21 side are all available at the one time, and this is as strong as Tipperary could be. And the nature of the structure of the championship this year gave them a chance to get to a semi-final after winning a Munster championship in a most unlikely of position at the start of the season. But I just think you look at this Mayo team who have been here and been to this dance so much over the last 10 years. They've been to, I think, 9 different semi-finals over the last 11 seasons. Notwithstanding that their team has had a bit of flux and change and they've been introducing younger players, I think that little bit of experience might count for a lot when they go up against a Tipperary team who, for the best part, some of them would have played in an All-Ireland semi-final previously, but for that Tipperary team, it's going to be a fairly new experience with quite a bit of expectation on them, you would think, on the back of winning the Munster going into that semi-final against Mayo. And I just think that, plus Mayo's superior options on the bench, will be enough to just get them down the track in that semi-final.
Is there much expectation, though, lads? Really, is there really much expectation? Like, they've done the job, they've broken 80 years, and they enjoyed it. Like I'm sure they absolutely believe it within the group, and that's one of the other reasons I feel like Tipperary got back on track very quickly, and they're riding the wave of that Munster final. But I'm not sure there's that much expectation on them. Like, this is Mayo they're playing.
Yeah, they're a massive underdog. I'd agree with you actually on that there's not a whole pile of pressure. And also, again, to say it for the umpteenth time, the lack of crowd as well will probably take away that sense of occasion, which feeds into the pressure. I'm going to need one very quick answer from all of you here. How many points are Dublin going to beat Cavan by? Will, we'll start with you.
I think maybe 11.
11, Tommy?
9.
9, Adrian?
12.
12, right. So we're expecting...
What do you say, no?
That's all inside the spread. The spread is 14, isn't it? I think it is. I'm going to go for 14.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for 14 points.
And last word, I may have talked myself into talking Meath up before that
you
Leinster
did.
final.
You very much did. You talked yourself into a frenzy.
I may have been off in a few days and got a bit giddy and talked myself into it, and it took me a couple of takes to actually say the words I'm tipping Meath, I'll be honest with you. But I genuinely thought that they could get at Dublin. I genuinely thought they could build on
never
that
believed
the previous year.
Come on.
This is not a thought about the Leinster final.
I genuinely thought they could get at them, and a lot of people thought they could.
Well, what does that mean? You never thought they were going to beat them, though.
Dublin have showed a level of sloppiness sometimes this year, and now they absolutely destroyed Meath. But a big part of that, lads, was the psychological factor of that. Meath, I'm not going to mention the first 3 minutes, but they did one or two good things at the very start, and then they just stopped. And it's like, it wasn't like, it was psychological, lads. Like, Meath's amount of tackles and the amount of hits and the amount of hands they got on Dublin players in that game was horrendous. And it's as if they froze on the pitch in Croke Park. And it was very, very difficult. I don't think Cavan are going to freeze. I think Cavan are going to get the hits in. I don't think they're not going to beat them like they did against Donegal. It's a different pitch. Donegal are a completely different proposition physically. But I do think Cavan will put in a shift and they'll get inside the spread. And I think they'll keep the single digits this weekend.
We will have more Leinster final analysis next week on the Quick Picks. Will, Tommy, thank you very much. Adrian, you're sticking with us. And here's a chat from last night, which we'll get your take on in a moment, because it got a huge reaction. It's Nathan on the news round with Will and Richie, talking about the confusion over plans to restart sports and bring back fans in Ireland.
It seems difficult to justify when there are certain sports allowed to continue at underage level and quote-unquote elite level, and others can't.
It's just the latest issue around sport that doesn't seem to have any sort of clarity and is just adding to the confusion. So what is the difference between the under-17 and under-19 League of Ireland seasons that, as far as I know, are 2 weeks from the end and a final to go, so within 3 weekends, by Christmas they'll be done? What's the difference between that and a minor and under-21 GAA championship, which also don't have many games to go, but one can continue, one can't? You touch on what happened with basketball. Will, last night you covered this. What about the indoor sports of basketball, boxing, gymnastics that are away from the big three, but that a huge amount of people use it as an outlet? They are given absolutely no thought, it seems, by any of the advice that's coming from government. And even then, at that elite level of those big three sports, when are supporters going to be allowed into stadiums? So we see tonight, is it Arsenal have 2,000 people in? Yeah. Supporters are coming back in. When are we... there's no talk at all of supporters coming back in for the All-Ireland finals, for the FAI Cup final, for the Rugby International this weekend. And it doesn't even seem to be a conversation about when we're going to get them back in, when the vast majority of countries are at the very least making plans. And that doesn't even get to underage level. And that the vast majority of kids, GAA, soccer, you name it, have had 1 or 2 competitive games since last March. They're still not allowed contact training, outdoor, pods of 15, with no real plan as to when that is going to come to an end. And listen, my kids are 8 or 9. We're delighted to get them up training. It's difficult to keep their attention span up. But for kids of 14 or 15 to train and train and train and not have any competitive outlet at the end, like God knows what the dropout rates are going to be in that age group when eventually sport does come back fully. And you would have thought, with everything that has happened, that sport would be a crucial part of a fitter, healthier, better Ireland coming out of COVID. Yet there's such little talk about it, aside from, let's make sure the League of Ireland, the GAA Championship and international rugby and provincial rugby can go ahead. And they should, because they're important drivers of revenue and all of that. But what about the rest of it? What about the stuff that there's no glamour attached to? Like, come out and talk about it. Come out and give us a plan that's not just week on week, sport on sport. And the FAI are confused. Like, are the GAA Championships now going to go ahead, or is there going to be pressure on minor and under 20? Like, God knows. God knows what is going to happen.
That's
big reaction to that last night. Nathan on the news round, a full podcast available in all the usual podcast places. He's right, Adrian.
Yeah, I think he is up to a point. Yeah, he makes some excellent points there, and he's clearly extremely passionate about it as well, and rightly so, I would say. I think that there are inconsistencies about the national plan, sport or non-sport, and I've always been comfortable with that because I think that we're in brand new territory. Less and less so, obviously, as the experience of it goes by. But there are going to be inconsistencies about the plan, like that. It just needs to be the way it is. And I know that people frequently say, "Well, we can do this, but why can't we do that?" Like, it can't be a blanket thing. I understand why it's slightly inconsistent. The one point I would totally agree with is the lack of any coherent conversation that's coming from government around it. I know that there was some sort of a statement came in during the week from the Ministry for Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sport and the Media, to give it its full title, about a European sports ministers discussing a safe return for spectators, which is effectively one of these talking shops that everybody justifies their salary and get involved in a room and, to push the topic around the room, and nobody ever actually does anything about it. But I would like to hear from Jack Chambers on this. I made the point on Twitter last night. We heard from him a number of weeks back when he was about to put the marching boots on and march out to the FAI to question them about equal pay for the Republic of Ireland national women's team, and we haven't heard a peep out of him since that, or even about that since. And we'd certainly like to hear from him on this one.
Definitely, I think you kind of alluded to one of the broader issues there as well. The amount of things in that portfolio is absolutely absurd. I think John Green in the Sunday Independent put it best a few months ago when he said it's the ministry of so on and so forth, and that has to be a factor in this when sport is so far down the priority order. He mentions it there in his piece as well about fans coming back into stadium. We saw them at the Emirates last night. For Arsenal, we're going to see it quite a lot over the course of this weekend. People in Premier League stadiums being beamed into our homes in Ireland when there hasn't been a peep of people coming back to stadiums here. And I think we're actually still being punished for the mismanagement in certain places of some club GAA games during the summer, the ridiculous scenes outside that Cork club final, for example, some of the, I guess, lack of social distancing inside GAA grounds, things weren't done very well. And I think right now the conversation is off the table as a result of that we're still being punished a little bit for what happened during the summer, and other sports are being punished for what happened within GAA grounds as well, which is doubly unfair. What do you think about this, Shane Hannon? Good morning, by the way.
Morning, lads. It's a strange one. Inconsistency and hypocrisy were a couple of things that Nathan, I guess, was alluding to. And you mentioned conversation, Adrian, and I think the lack of communication from the government on some of these issues. Basketball Ireland have voiced their concerns about the lack of communication previously. The other thing to remember is they're not allowing under 13 to under 19 grades to play, but the reality is many senior teams across the country, including my own local team here, Monaghan Town FC, have players in the ranks of the senior team who are 17, 18 years old, some maybe who are even 16 years old. So the reality is these players will be playing anyway. They just won't be playing in their proper age grade. So it's a bit hypocritical, to say the least. So it's a strange one. And I guess, rightly, people can feel a little bit peeved at the whole thing.
Just the one point on the communication of the conversation around it, like there might be a whole raft of conversations in the department for all those 10 different things are going to come out in the next few days and tell us all that's going on. I suspect it's probably not. I was listening to Stephen Donnelly talking yesterday about some other aspect of the plan and saying there was it was in relation to the vaccine and the rollout of the vaccine. A lot of hard work going on was how he put it. So you generally tend to hear from the government when there's a lot of hard work going on in terms of having conversations around these things. I suspect it's stony silent, I suspect.
We would love to hear your thoughts on this. You can tweet us at Off the Ball, comment on the YouTube stream. We'll get to them in a moment, especially in relation to Adrian's League of Ireland plan. Top of the morning from Slovakia, says Kevin Callaghan, and a little bit of a chat in the YouTube comments where Mark Keogh asks, how's the weather in Slovakia, Kev? It's frosty here in Dublin. And Kevin Callaghan replies, it's like an Irish day, mate. Cloudy around 1 degree Celsius. We had big snow last week. These are the conversations we're here for. It is 8:48 on this Friday morning. What's happening in the world of sport, Shane?
Yeah, we'll start with the Town lads. A late Jordan Flores goal wasn't enough to prevent Dundalk losing another Europa League tie last night. Unfortunately, the Lee Whites going down 3-1 to Molde in Norway. Arsenal qualified for the next phase, though, as group winners after they beat Rapid Vienna by 4-1. There were signs of encouragement for Celtic last night. They did still lose, though, 4-2 away to AC Milan. Tottenham sealed the last 32 berth despite a 3-3 draw away to Lask. Rangers also booked their place in the knockout phase by beating Standard Liège 3-2 at Ibrox, while Leicester City, already assured of a knockout place, lost by 1-0 away to Zorya Luhansk. To rugby, Ireland will put the finishing touches later to their preparations for tomorrow's concluding Autumn Nations Cup fixture. That's against Scotland in Dublin. Captain Johnny Sexton and Robbie Henshaw are back in the starting 15. Connacht host Benetton in a rescheduled Guinness Pro 14 fixture. That's at the Sports Ground tonight. Benetton is still searching for their first win of the season, while Connacht know they can go second in Conference B. That game is a 7:35pm kickoff tonight. Some GAA news this morning. Eddie Brennan is back on the hurling sideline with Dublin club Coola. The former All-Ireland winner with Kilkenny is to coach the Dalkey side under manager John Toomey. Brennan recently, of course, left his role as manager of the Laois senior team, and as Will mentioned already this morning, Seamus Cheddar Plunkett is set to return for a second spell in charge of the Laois hurlers to replace Brennan, previously in charge from 2012 to 2016. His appointment is expected to be ratified in the coming days. Jonathan Caldwell and Cormac Sharvin both go into the second round of golf's South African Open, 5 shots off the lead. The pair of Ulster men are currently level par. Ruben Korb leads the field on 7 under. Formula One driver George Russell makes his Mercedes debut today as he replaces Lewis Hamilton at the Sakhir Grand Prix. The first 2 practice sessions take place in Bahrain, with Hamilton missing the weekend's action after testing positive for coronavirus. And some good news from an Irish sporting perspective this morning. Voting is open for the BBC's World Sport Star of the Year for 2020 award. There are 6 nominees, with Bray boxing sensation Katie Taylor up against NBA greatness in LeBron James. The other nominees ahead of the awards on December 20th are Masters champion Dustin Johnson, UFC star Khabib Nurmagomedov, women's footballer Wendy Renard, and Swedish pole vaulter Armand Duplantis. Last year's winner was marathon runner Eliud Kipchoge. So best of luck to Katie in that one.
That's class. What is happening on this weekend on Off the Ball, Shane?
Yeah, loads of good stuff coming across Saturday and Sunday. So live on air from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, as always, this Saturday. Paul Galvin will be with John Duggan. He'll be talking about the All-Ireland Senior semi-finals and discussing his time with Wexford, as well as the gap in quality in the Leinster Football Championship. We'll have some Cavan 1997 nostalgia as well, with 2 members of that 97 panel, Stephen King and Ronan Carlin. OTB Football Saturday, as per usual, Gary Breen, Johnny and Dan with John Duggan for that one. Mossy Quinn will be at that Cavan Dubs game, by the way, for us. And then on Sunday, it's the live Premier League game is the big one, 4:30, Spurs against Arsenal in the North London derby. Brian Kerr will be alongside Nathan Murphy for that game. We'll also have Clean O'Connor at the All-Ireland Ladies Senior Football Championship semi-final between Cork and Galway in Parnell Park. Andy Moran will be at Mayo and Tip for us in Croker, while we'll have the paper review with Matt Williams and Colm Keys, as well as Andy Dunn discussing all things rugby.
That's one hell of a lineup across both days, live from 1 o'clock on the radio and on the OTB Sports app. Shane Hannon, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
A couple of more comments before we get to Alan Quinlan this morning. Mark Keogh says, morning lads, first time watching this. Love this. I will tune in and watch every day on my way to work. Thanks a million for getting in touch, Mark. Aaron Craig has been in touch meanwhile, saying, Eoin back in the capital and the studio. What a time to be alive. Tell me about it, Aaron. What a time to be alive is right. Sean O'Connor says, oh God, Dublin are really going to do a job on Cavan. I fear you might be spot on, Sean. I really hope each and every one of us are humbled to the extreme on Monday morning after tomorrow night. I really hope we're all wrong. It would be one of the most universally beloved stories if Cavan were to go all the way in this year's championship. It would be extraordinary. It's nothing to do with Dublin. It's just that this has the possibility of being the biggest upset in the history of the GAA, possibly, if they manage to win that game tomorrow. It would be incredible. Dave B, meanwhile, is getting in touch with regards to your League of Ireland plan, Adrian. He says, in the words of Homer Simpson, can Adrian dumb it down a bit? And definitely sprung to mind as well the eternal words of Michael Scott, can you please explain it to me like I'm 5, would be the way I would put it. Can That's you do enough. That? What's the top line here?
I would say that I wanted to go into obviously great detail on the basis that I knew you were going to get your machine gun out, and I wanted to cross off every question as it came in, or preempt it almost. But yeah, the top line of it is, to explain it to a 5-year-old, is that the premise of it is to secure European football, and ideally you're looking at a minimum of Europa League group stages for an Irish team every single year. It's to hothouse and put a focus on one team, but not always the same team, across, let's say, 3-year cycle.
Joe Conroy said it's Sporting Era. That's the name of this club, that it should be this, you say it's not every club should be the same, or not, it shouldn't be the same club every year. Maybe we just pick one club and let it be that and be done with it and call it Sporting Era.
Well, the thing is, it'd also become everybody's second team.
Except if you're like a Shells fan or a Bows fan, any League of Ireland fan.
Well, maybe when year after year we're people in the way that I know that certain maybe fans wouldn't have done, but I think by and large League of Ireland fans got behind Dundalk. Now maybe if that's happening every single year, then it's less of a novelty. But isn't that a fantastic place to be in? I'm guaranteeing Europa League group stage action for League of Ireland teams every single year. That's it. Simple.
Obviously, the mechanics of how you actually go about it is a little bit more complicated than that.
That's the 10-minute video. You can check it out on Twitter.
Yeah. Like, do you actually see an avenue like this, not maybe your specific plan, but an avenue like this being explored down the line where the FAI actually realise that the group stages of the Europa League is where a team needs to be, and that is where the priority will lie?
Well, I think it comes back to the point I made earlier about like whether it's a hand out or a hand up. And up to now, let's be honest about it, the League of Ireland has only been looking for a hand out, and it's struggled. Like I myself have partaken in consultations before with the association where they've come looking to figure out from a media side what it is that's going wrong. It hasn't been cracked. Like that sort of stuff's been happening for decades, and it hasn't been cracked. So do you continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, or do you start to look at it slightly differently? I mean, there's been so many ideas that have been brought in over the last little while. Could we stream games to Asia? Could we stream games to South America? There's no evidence of any of that stuff working, and I'm not guaranteeing that this worked. This would work. As I said, it's radical. It's pretty radical, and you'd probably have to some sort of compromises along the way. But try something else.
We're going to get to Alan Quinlan in just a moment. Before that, let's give you a flavour of the back pages this morning. Rugby is leading the way in the Irish Times, which we'll discuss with Quinny in just a moment. Farrell remaining calm despite pressure to end first year in charge on a high. Gavin Cummiskey, meanwhile, writing that impasse leads agents to offer top Irish players to French clubs. That is possibly a worrying development. And Stockdale enjoying the chance to indulge his creative side. The Irish Examiner this morning goes with €15 million grant for GEA once off. That's John Fogarty's piece. Meanwhile, Morrissey wants family members at All-Ireland final. This is Tom Morrissey, who is calling for families to be allowed in the gates of Croke Park on All-Ireland final day. Rochford then, the comments I mentioned earlier on, he was speaking on the Irish Examiner GEA podcast. Tip too dependent on Star Duo, he reckons, for them to cause an upset this weekend. And Paul Fitzpatrick, this rainy season has been a long one for the devoted Cavan football fan. That is the Irish Examiner. The Irish Independent leads with a photo there of Oisin Murphy talking about the mistakes he made that led to a drugs ban. The rock and roll thing, I can't dance, I'm regularly tested. And sex, well, I'm 25 and male. Quite the quotes from Oisin Murphy in a piece that was done with the Telegraph today, which is carried in the Irish Independent. Meanwhile, the main story here is Farrell claims the ups and downs make him stronger. Performance specialist Keegan drafted in, but Ireland coach insists he's not under pressure. Meanwhile, the Guardian there, as you can see, Sutton Storm, UK Sport did not act on claims of corruption, emails suggest, and fantastic supporters are back at the Emirates as Arsenal turn on the style in Europe. Picture there of Alexandra Lacazette then in the Daily Telegraph sports section, and backlash over £250 million bailout. Premier League's rescue package comes with strings. The Irish Sun goes with the headline, a messy divorce. President, we should have taken the money last summer. They should have gotten rid of Lionel Messi, reckons chiefs at Barcelona. And Gunners saw us is their headline on fans coming back to the Emirates last night. The Irish Daily Star is a snappy hour. That is their headline on the back page. Defeat in Milan fails to upset boss Lennon. So that's a couple of the back pages. We'll get to the rest of them in just a moment. As I mentioned, the Irish Independent here leads with the headline. Farrell claims the ups and downs make him stronger, and performance specialist Gary Keegan drafted in, but Ireland coach insists he's not under pressure. Alan Quinlan, good morning.
Morning, Owen. How are you?
Very well, thanks. That news of Gary Keegan coming in to start working with the Ireland squad is something that perhaps might have surprised a few people, but you can see why a team like Ireland would bring in somebody like him, because there have been questions asked of their performance anxiety in particular after last year's World Cup.
Yeah, look, they were always going to bring someone in after Enda McNulty finished up with the team, so it's not a major surprise that there's somebody there working on the sports psychology. That's something every team would have available to them and have working with them. So, yeah, the one thing I think about on with the Irish rugby team, and look, they've had a fair few ups and downs in the last 18, 20 months, I think, and a lot of pressure and expectation to deal with. So that is something certainly that, they've had to endure, if you like. They're showing a lot of tenacity and resilience, and they're saying the right things, and they're trying to build their confidence and feel good factor within the group. But look, the performances haven't been where they probably can get to, if you like. And, there has been that transitional phase with Joe leaving and Andy Farrell coming in. And a different type of game that they're trying to play. So there's been a lot of stuff going on. So it's not a surprise that they have, someone working with them like Gary, and it's a regular thing and it's a common thing. That the psychology of this sport is as important a lot of the time as the physical stuff and the tactical stuff.
It's definitely been interesting listening to someone like Eddie Jones talk over the last few months, and listening to some of the different people around sport that he's communicated with and the different ideas that he's taken on board. I guess seeing this news is encouraging at that front, that I guess Andy Farrell is open to broadening his horizons a little bit, and maybe if he does a little bit more of this over the next little while, there could be a little bit of an overachievement from Ireland's part, a sense that actually they can get back to the top table pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, look, it comes down to player personnel as well, and that transition that I'm talking about. There's been a lot of players around for a long time. Can some of those guys still perform? Of course they can, but I think a problem is we've probably had to rely on some of those senior players to deliver performances. And I've been involved with teams in my career where it's just such a breath of fresh air when young players come in and they do brilliant things and they can create so much excitement about a team. And we saw a lot of that in 2018 with, Porter coming in, Larmour, Levy, James Ryan. These guys bring such a surge of energy. Gary Ringrose in the previous couple of years to that. So what we haven't seen is that same level of excitement with the players that Andy Farrell has captained the last 12 months. I suppose there was optimism around Gibson Park and James Lowe coming in. Eoin Keenan has done very well, but that really exciting kind of player who is going to go on and win 70, 80 caps. We could do one or two of them coming into it. Ronan Keller could be around for a long time. Who knows? But there's a number of injuries and there's a number of players out. So the depth chart has been really challenged. And like I said, the ups and downs. And it's a challenging time for Andy Farrell himself. So, when you're an assistant coach, you can sit behind, if you like, a little bit, and you don't get the same flack that the head coach gets. And, he's dealing with a fair bit of criticism around the team in the last while. Like I said, there's been some good performances, but you have to be a realist as well. We're a level below where England are at the moment, probably New Zealand, and we're in that tier. Even though we're tier one side, we're probably in a second tier in that tier one nations. And but I think there's people are crying out for a bit of excitement and a bit of energy. It has been difficult, no crowds, and it's not going to happen overnight. So he has to deal with that as well, Andy Farrell, and his coaching team. So it's it's a tricky place, and you have to be strong within that group, and you have to be resilient and tough and stick together, and that's what they'll try and do. But that's the pressure and expectation that's there nowadays with the Irish rugby team. You've got to deal with it, and lots of people in the last few years saying, the Irish rugby team don't get much criticism. Well, they've got their fair share in the last 18 months anyway in the media, and they've got loads of criticism. So, it's a tricky place for them. But if they finish in a high against Scotland, you can say then, the question was asked this week about progress, and lots of people were talking, where's the progress? It's hard to see where there's consistent progress. We've probably regressed in a number of areas. The set piece is one that's your foundation, your fundamental part of your game, and that's been very, very creaky and poor in this campaign. So they need to sort out a number of problems, and you can't have consistency in selection if you're looking for change and you're looking to chop and change and see guys. So in many senses, you can take the positives out of it, and I say this as an ex-player, you kind of have to believe that the rocky patch, you'll learn from it and you'll get better, and if you keep working hard, that things turn around a little bit. But you need quality as well, and you need young players coming in to really grasp hold of the situation. So we're not in a bad place, but I think we can be better than where we're at the moment, for sure.
Quinlan, there's a lot in that. We might come back to even the strategic side of it, and there's a lot of discussion about David Nucifora, particularly this week. But you mentioned about some of the exciting players maybe that we haven't seen coming through over the last little while. One of the names that's been talked about now for various reasons is Ben Healy. What are you hearing?
No, he's progressed very well. Look, it's still early days for him, and I think you could see by his performances. And look, it's a far less pressurised environment playing Pro 14 when all the internationals are away. Munster are dominating, winning with bonus points. So he's building up a bit of mileage in the clock by playing.
Is he staying or is he going?
Oh, is he staying? Oh, sorry, I didn't understand what you meant there. I'd be very surprised if he even entertained the notion of going playing for Scotland. Given he's a Tipperary man as well, and he's one of our own. That look, I don't know. Obviously, the financial stuff would turn your head a little bit if he's on, 20 grand on an academy contract or whatever it is. I don't know the exact figure, and Glasgow can offer him 100 grand a year or something. You'd have to go, short-term gain for long-term gain, or what you want to get long-term out of it. And I'm sure his ambition is to, he's broken into the Munster team and stay. I don't know. Can't speak for the guy, but I'd be very surprised if that goes anywhere, to be honest.
Does the IRFU need to step in and sort of ditch out their own short-term policy of not engaging in contract talks to lock him down, or are they in that danger, do you think?
Well, they can't, and you know what I mean. I've been in this situation a good few times where, particularly coming to the end of your career, you are worried about a contract, particularly the older players. What's going to happen? Younger players, then other clubs and other people looking for them. It's been an absolutely crazy time. The RFU have been bleeding money for the last number of months with the losses and nothing coming in, basically. I know the government bailout will help steady the ship a little bit, but you can't go. It's fully understandable. The players have got to understand they have to, wait till after Christmas to try and sort contracts out. You can't just start guaranteeing contracts and money until there's some sort of certainty or a little bit more certainty for the RFU. So everybody's got to take that in the chin and deal with that reality. It's up to Munster to try and make their case and within their budget, if they want to bring Ben Healy up to a full-time contract. And, you've got to, there's only so many players and so much budget you have in the squad. So they've got to make that decision. But you can't just say, well, all these players should be tied down and young players, old players in December. It's just not possible. People are going to have to wait, and that's just the reality of it.
What did you make of the conversations about David Nucifora then this week? There's been Gordon Darcy had written about it, and he was on with Jaron Owen yesterday in a bit more detail about it. Like as he says it, there's a confusion about what it is that the performance director, what is the remit of his role is, and specifically what it is he's doing within that. What is success for him within that? Where's the Rugby World Cup report? A lot of questions about David Nucifora and his role this week. What have you made of it?
Well, I think that the kind of headline one was his accountability. His accountability is to the IRFU, I think, and there's a professional games committee there that he has to report into. So I found that strange. You can throw flippant remarks and comments out there that he's not answerable to be anybody, but he's answerable to the CEO and that committee. Owen Redden is as an ex-player, he's the only ex-player on that committee. So I think there is accountability. Look, 2 years ago, he was doing an incredible job. We were the envy of the world. We had this performance director running our game here, the club game, the professional game, the sevens, the women's rugby, and everything was right. So, I think there's obviously a fair bit of angst against him because of, and particularly coming from Leinster, because the players that have moved, Carberry was the high profile one, Roman Salano was the most recent one, and lots of people slinging mud at David Nucifora from Leinster, and I can.
But do you not think he should come out if the questions are there? If the questions are there about his remit, and fair enough about the accountability point, but like if the questions are there and people aren't sure about what it is success is for him, like there doesn't seem to be publicly anyway, maybe as you say they exist within the RFU but nobody knows about them, the parameters for his remit or clear identifiers around what success looks for him. Why doesn't he come out and just walk people through that? Like, I think Gordon Darcy is correct to say that he's flippant in his dealings with the media.
Yeah, look, I do agree with that. It's kind of behind the scenes, isn't it? I do agree with that. I agree that he probably should come out and speak more, and and give those plans and structures and what they want. But you can read all that stuff in the reports, what the RFU want to achieve regarding Six Nations, World Cup qualifications. It's kind of like the goal setting from the union themselves, where they want to be in the club game. All that stuff is on the RFU. So I can understand, though, yes, David Nucifora comes out every once in a while and everyone is clambering to try and ask questions and figure things out. But that probably should be a more regular thing. And regarding the accountability to the Irish public, that's probably an RFU thing. It's an RFU decision. And like I say, people probably want, given the current circumstances, obviously with Joe involved and Joe Schmidt involved, they were, quite close, and Joe would have been a spokesman for any involvement around the team. And because of that negative run, and because of the, probably a period of time now where the team are not going well, people want to hear more from that. Was the RFU report from the World Cup not published, Adrian?
No, it hasn't been. The details of it haven't been put out there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's something that Gordon was looking for, and make that out into the public, I suppose. Yeah. Look, there's an argument to say that stuff should be out there, but I think they did release a fair amount of stuff out of it around the confidence and. Yeah,
exactly. There was some little bits,
I just don't know what people. What do they want David Nucifora to do? To come out into the press once a week? Is it
No, I don't think so. But I think he makes the point, doesn't he, that he was on after Georgia, and there was the expectation that it was going to be this great sort of, we were going to thump Georgia and everything was going to look good, and then he came out and he was like, I watched a lot of his dealings with in that press conference, and he's not. I don't take a huge amount of confidence from what he's saying in terms of the plan. Like Gordon Darcy himself had said that, like, are we just overly reliant on the Leinster school systems to produce players? And then the performance director is saying, well, look, everything's fine. And actually it's a paper thin explainer of it.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I'm just a bit confused by this. That's it's kind of like as if we have no plan. The RFU system here is, and I've always been an advocate of the provincial system and the development of players coming through, and that pathway to get into the professional game. The club game is something that I came through myself, and that needs more resources. I think the RFU are in the middle of a plan with Collie McEntee of giving resources and finances to the clubs right across the country. My own club, Clanwilliam, would benefit from that. Every club in the country is getting financial support from the RFU. The structures around bringing players through, well, the club game is not as strong. You just look at somewhere like Limerick, when I played with Shannon, the competition, the rivalries, all that stuff has gone. But the professional game has done that to it, and we probably don't see enough players coming through the club system. The school system is probably more of a natural progression, and it's hard to make that progression through the club system. But it's an area that needs to improve. But I think I'm just not sure where it's all coming from. It's kind of like suggesting that we have no plan and everything is wrong within Irish rugby. I just find that kind of baffling. That's kind of the story during the week. I'm not sticking up for David Nucifora or the RFU, but I don't know where the major issue is here. It's obviously there's a lot of questions about what's his accountability and what's his role. And like I said 2 years ago, we were the envy of a lot of teams in the world. Absolutely, loads of stuff needs to get better, and you can always improve things. We need to develop more players. We need to try and find a way to have, particularly in Munster, the school system and the club system and the professional game more aligned. That happens so much better in Leinster. And that's proven because obviously they have more numbers as well. But that transition and that connection between the Leinster branch and the school system is far more fluid than it is in Munster. So, of course, those things need to change, and there has to be the accountability thing. Is yes, maybe David Nucifora needs to come out more and share these plans publicly, and But a lot of the plans and the strategic plans are on the RFU website, and I had a look at a lot of that stuff, and so it's probably there for everyone to see. But you know, people are probably questioning and looking for, you know, what's his plan, what's his role, what's his job. His job is to try and make sure that we have enough of players playing for Ireland, and that, you know, he's probably upset people that there has been movement around in the provinces, but that stuff wouldn't have happened and without David Nisafor. And I think a lot of this stuff is coming from Leinster, the criticism around him. So of course he needs accountability. Everybody needs accountability when you get well paid in a job, but you know, and that's something that I suppose Gordon was talking about.
Great stuff, Alan. We'll chat to you again on Monday to review the Scotland game. Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
It's 9:15. Plenty still to come on OTB AM, but here's what you can listen to across today on OTB Sports Radio. At 1 o'clock, we've got OTB Gold with Catherine Switzer. We've got the Paddy Power half hour. We've got Friday Night Racing at 3 o'clock. Team 33 with Liam Coyle from 4 o'clock. Then 6 p.m. with Ronnie Delaney. OTB tonight, then we'll bring you part 2 of our All-Ireland semi-final roadshow with Super Value. We are back with Jim McGuinness in conversation with Kieran Donaghy ahead of the All-Ireland semi-finals right after these.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
Ferguson has a knack for seeing maverick and, you know, kind of creative genius and sort of letting it flow.
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists. The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
And you just got to keep, it's a bit like a sportsman, you got to keep match fit. And it's funny, with music or comedy or anything like that, you do have to keep stage fit. If you don't, you kind of, it's very, very odd.
Right.
So yeah, trying to keep it going.
If you want to test if he wants to test his acting skills, Pat, why don't you throw on that civil defence jacket there from the original Unbelievables and try and get into Croke Park on Sunday? Just barge up and pretend you own the place. Do you think if you can get into Croke Park on Sunday, there has to be an Academy Award heading for you?
I've done it before. I was a great man when I was a young fella in Turles for selling programmes. You just go up to the turn and say, selling programmes in the dictionary.
Follow the leader, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, the world's best-selling plug-in hybrid, is now available with 0% finance and a free home charge point worth €800. Leading the charge in plug-in hybrid technology, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. Book a test drive at your local dealer today. Mitsubishi, drive your ambition. Terms and conditions apply. See mitsubishimotors.ie. Lending criteria applies. This is a hire purchase agreement provided by Bank of Ireland Finance.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, your Mo supported our frontline workers this Movember.
You'll have seen Pat Short there in the ad break, one of our special guests on the latest OTB Super Value Roadshow around the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. You can watch it across our OTB social channels right now. #support where you're from. Right, this year's GAA All-Ireland Championship semi-finals and finals are going to be live on Sky Sports Mix. Sky Sports Mix is available in approximately 900,000 homes in Ireland on Sky Channel 416 and Virgin Channel 409. Jim McGuinness and Kieran Donaghy will be on analysis all across the weekend for Sky. And last night, Kieran caught up with Jim to look ahead to the semi-finals and break down McGuinness's vision for the future of the All-Ireland Championships.
Welcome to OTB AM. Kieran Donaghy here, delighted to be joined by my Sky Sports colleague and Donegal all-round legend, Jim McGuinness. Jim, how's the farm? How are you keeping?
Kieran, good. Good to be with you.
Looking forward to the weekend?
Yes, I think it is the makings of a very exciting weekend. To think that you have a Division 3 team that finished 5th in Division 3, 70 minutes away from an All-Ireland final, and, you know, looking at them, the way they played the last day and their approach to the game and the way the manager's speaking, there's a real belief in there that they can do it as well. So looking forward to that one. Cavan have done amazingly well up to this point, and the grit and determination and focus that they've brought, complete underdogs in every single game, written off, you know, beyond belief. and yet in all there was something within that group as well. So that's been really refreshing to see that. They have a huge challenge against the Dubs. Obviously, you know, we're all very much aware of that. What I like about it, Kieran, is I like the fact that you have a situation with Mickey Graham where he seems to have taken all the pressure out of the event for them. I was very taken with the fact that even in the Ulster final, whenever those water breaks and stuff, you could see him in amongst the players, you know, having a joke, putting his arm around them, taking the sting out of the occasion for them, and just basically saying, you know, this is bonus territory. He mentioned that before the Ulster final, and just go out and play and enjoy it and see it through and stuff. So I would expect them to bring a similar approach on Saturday evening.
Yeah, he's done remarkably well, and you know he did that with Mullinyacht too when they beat Kilmacud Crokes that time, because that was a David and Goliath. So, you know, he's got a bit of form in this. So yeah, it'll be exciting to see what they bring. Is what I'm really looking forward to. I suppose, Jim, just to get you on, and thanks for coming on with me. I want to get stuck into this, your article in the Irish Times, which was excellent last week, and your piece with Inside the Game on Sky Sports last Wednesday night, just on the reform of the championship. And I think when most people talk about these tiered championships, and a lot of focus is on the top tier and how do we get more games between the top players. I think that's what the Super 8s was brought in for. Reading your piece, I think it's really dialed in, and you focused really much more on the Tailteann Cup side of things, and how do we really bring on all the counties, even counties that would be possibly hurling predominant counties, and how do we give them their day in the sun? And we see it working with the club structure, and you see the intermediate finals and junior finals in Croke Park, and the joyous scenes between fans and players when they win those competitions. And there's a part of this, what I really got from reading it is kind of, I had a vision of seeing this Tailteann Cup winner, crowds running on, or players running around the pitch, climbing the Hogan stand, views of Sam Maguire next year. I suppose we'll take people through it, starting from the very top. There's two tiers, obviously, or brackets, I think, as you like to call them.
Yeah, I think one of the big things, Kieran, here is that everybody's part of the conversation. That was a lot of where my thinking was come from, and I think that there is an us and a them within the GAA. You know, there's the top teams and there's the other teams. And so where my thought processes took me was sort of, was there a structure out there potentially that could link the National League with the provincial championships? The provincial championships have been under a lot of pressure for a long time, and people calling for them to be axed and stuff. I was never part of that group. But I think this year has totally bucked the trend in that regard, and I think the provincial championships will be safe again now moving forward based on what is going on in this championship. So my thinking was, can we create a structure, a format for championship where all the competitions are meaningful and all the competitions are linked together, and so the National League would have a significance, the provincial championship would have a significance, and then the championship itself. And so it would end up in two structures. But the beginning of the year, obviously, every year, you know, people soldier away in the National League. Some people, like yourself, maybe don't like playing all the games and do a bit of rest.
I was getting old, Jim. I wanted to play in all the games when I was a young fella. Don't worry about it.
But my thought process were, can we make that competition something truly competitive from the very first going off, and can we connect that with the championship? And that's where the thinking came, and so it was that thought process that led me to the structure that we're going to talk about.
It puts real focus on every game in the league, whether it's your first day out or your last day out. It puts real focus on every division throughout every game in the league. I think that's a real big thing. There's no kind of games off. There's no hour mid-table. It doesn't really matter. It really focuses you in that every win and every move you climb the ladder on every league table is your better position when it comes to whatever championship you're in. And we see it in March Madness in college basketball. You've got your brackets 1 to 64. You've got your 4 different brackets, and it gets broken down where you've 1 versus 16 tier teams. And there's shocks. You know, the 16 tier teams come along and catch a division or a tier 1 team out of nowhere. So I like the way you've linked all the division, all the leagues in league football, and that everybody is getting ready for that provincial championship, but they know whether it's Tailteann Cup or Sam Maguire they're in, that them league games, so it does kind of marry everything in together.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the thinking was that it would be based on rankings, and the first 16 teams would play each other, you know, at the end of all the rankings, with the first team playing the 16th, the second, the 15th, and so on and so forth. And so you have this situation, for example, you know, we can go through this year. I have it done out in front of me here. You had Kerry, Dublin, Galway, Tyrone, Donegal, and Monaghan. They would have finished 1st to 6th in the league. And then you had Monaghan, and then you had Roscommon and Armagh, who were promoted. So they would take the next 2 rankings. So the teams that finished 1st down to 6th would be the first 6 rankings. Then Roscommon and
7 and 8
that were promoted. Mayo and Meath were relegated, so they would take up the next 2 rankings, 9 and 10. And then Kildare were the team that finished 3rd in Division 2, and they would take up the 11th ranking. So that would be the ones that will be secure, if you like.
Okay.
And then the 12th ranking, that will be set aside for this Tier 2 competition. And the winner of that then would automatically qualify for the playoffs, which is the last 16 at Tier 1 or Tier 2 every single year. And so that, first of all, gives you an opportunity to put your best foot forward and to try and win that championship outright. And that we'll talk about sort of the dynamics around that in a wee while. And then the last 4 places in the rankings are for the 4 provincial winners, Ulster, Munster, Leinster and Connacht. So that will make up the 16. Now, what's going to happen, Kieran, in a lot of situation here is the teams that finished 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th in the league will also probably be provincial winners. And if that is the case, then the other teams outside the Kildare and on down into the 2nd division would take those spots,
the free spots. So if your favourites or your Division 1 teams end up winning a provincial championship, your teams that are fighting for that higher place in Division 2, how hard they fight and how hard they go actually determines whether they can be in that Sam Maguire
hunt. The 5th team, the 6th team, the 7th team. So the National League becomes very, very important. It doesn't matter what division you're in, because if you're in Division 4, you're kind of trying to get to Division 3. If you're Division 3, you're trying to get to Division 2, and you're trying to get into those rankings position. But then you've got the provincial championships, and the provincial championships then come after the National League. So if you are like Tipperary, for example, this year, and you finished in Division 3, and they finished 5th in Division 3, they wouldn't be inside the rankings, so they wouldn't be qualifying for the A-tier competition.
Sam Maguire, we
but
can call it,
because they won their province, they take one of those positions. So they push one of the teams that finished higher in Division 2 out of the equation.
Out of it.
Because they bucked the trend. And they came in and they won the provincial title from that position. Cavan were relegated to Division 3, and they did that as well. So here you have a situation where the thing is actually working in motion here now. You have the 1st division teams, you've got the big teams, and then you've got the teams that don't make that bracket, that have another chance to make that bracket. In a normal circumstance, Kieran, teams in Division 3, Division 4, they'll play in the league. They'll play in the championship, maybe against a big team. They'll get knocked out. They'll have one game in the qualifier, and the game and the season is over. So in this situation, they would still get to play in the league. They would still fight to get up as high as possible as they could in the league. Yes. And they still get the big, you know, the Waterfords, the Clares, the Tipperaries. They still get the crack at Kerry and Cork in the provincial championship. If they go and win it, they end up in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And if they don't, then they play in the last 16 of their own section. And the focus then becomes winning that. And that then brings them back into the...
And their league rankings in Division 3 and Division 4, if them teams are in it, that determines a better chance that they have of winning it. If they declare the higher they are, so your top team in Division 3 will end up playing your bottom team in Division 4, if that's the way it works out.
Correct.
Okay. So everybody's getting another game as well.
Yes, and everybody's striving for something.
Yeah.
And everybody's striving for something. And then crucially for me, the most important thing is this, that there's no us and them, that this thing is connected, that when the playoffs, I'm going to call them the playoffs, when the playoffs start to take place, you've got Dublin and Donegal, let's say it's in Cavan. Well, then there's a Tier 2 game going to happen as well. And that game is played before the Tier 1 game. So all the Tier 2 games are connected with the Tier 1 game every single weekend. So you'd
have 30 or 40,000, you'd have 30, 20,000, 25,000 in Breffni Park of fans around the bowl ready to see these 2 games and both competitive games, because they're realistically teams that are well pitted against each other.
Yeah, and listen, Kieran, we all grew up with the one thing in the back of our mind, and that was trying to emulate county players and trying to become a county player and trying to win things with our county. We've all done that, and so if I'm in Clare or Waterford or Leitrim or somewhere like that there, and this structure allows me to go and play championship football in front of 40,000 people or 50, and this structure would take place before the Tier 1 games, the whole way through to the All-Ireland final. Both All-Ireland finals would be on the same day. The semi-finals, the quarter-finals, they would all be on the same day. They would that precedent would be set the whole way through the championship. So you're 19 years of age, you're 20 years of age, you're from one of those counties, you're going down to Croke Park. It's a packed house. There's 4 counties fighting for tickets. I think revenue will be up in the National League. I think there'll be a massive interest in the provincial championships. I think the provincial championships will be rescued in terms of, the significance of them, giving people that second bite at the cherry. And then you have this other competition underpinned by the Tier 2 competition that means you're going to have packed houses. And it doesn't matter if you're in the Tier 2 game or the Tier 1 game, that's going to be very, very competitive football because the prizes are big. Think about that versus a qualifier game that ends. There's no comparison.
There's no comparison because that you often hear when the Tier 2 talk starts that a lot of the Tier 2 teams don't want to know about it. I think they're scarred by the Tommy Murphy Cup, and I had Declan Brown on a road show last night, and I was talking to him. He was the captain of Tipperary, and he said, we didn't think too much about it the year before, but I climbed the steps of the Hogan stand. I lifted a cup over my head for Tipperary. We got a holiday to New York with the group out of it. There was a huge buzz in the team going into the following season. And I think that's what we want to try and encourage, that these teams, that there's more motivation to come back even bigger and stronger next year. Because a part of your article is you maintain that some of these county boards and teams that don't see themselves as having a chance of winning the Sam Maguire, are nearly thrown in the towel before the season starts and not giving the team the support structures it possibly needs.
Yeah, I think the big thing is the why. Why are we here? We're here to train hard to be the best that we can be in the league. We're trying to get the best ranking that we can in the league, and we're also going to use that for preparation for the championship. We're going to go out into championship football and we're going to deliver our best performances, and if we won our province, that's amazing. If we fall short in that regard, we go into the other competition and we go after that with every single thing we've got. So from the very first day of the year, there's hope. And I think the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems facing a lot of these counties at the moment is they don't have that sense of hope and they don't feel part of the conversation. And so we have to find a way where people that are in these counties are continuing to aspire to be that guy, to look at their captain, as you said earlier, climbing the steps of Croke Park and lifting that championship in front of 84,000. I mean, that is a special moment. Like, it doesn't matter. That is a special moment for any player, And so it's going to be All-Ireland final day, and the vibe is going to be there, the feeling's going to be there, the crowd's going to be there, it's going to be championship football, and I can't see how that dynamic could fail, Kieran.
Yeah, no, I think we've nailed a few things, Jim. I think the double header and guaranteeing the Tailteann Cup and Sam Maguire games will always happen on the same day, that there's one of each is huge. Because as you rightly say, if I'm a youngster from a struggling county or a county that hasn't been at the top table and I'm going up to play in front of this big crowd in Croke Park, and not even Croke Park, maybe we bring a lot of these early games to provincial venues where, like that famous atmosphere in 2014, the Gaelic grounds between Kerry and Mayo. There's obviously provincial finals a number of years ago. There used to be great atmospheres at them, packed houses, and you'd have more of that. So we've nailed that. If we can guarantee the Tailteann Cup games are linked in with the Sam Maguire games, and I know you call them brackets, I'm just trying to put it into the terms that we're talking about for next season possibly. If we can have them games guaranteed to be on TV, that the double header that Sky Sports have is the Tailteann Cup game followed by the Sam Maguire game. Likewise, with other broadcasters the following day, they would have similar. So you're guaranteed profile, you're guaranteed a crowd, you're guaranteed a chance to go on. There's a lot of guarantees there. I think the one missing piece, and another piece that you talked about.
Just one thing. Yes. Just one thing I was going to say, Kieran, was also from the very first day of the season, everything is funneling towards the playoffs.
Yes.
It was the best 16 teams, and they're there in merit. Look at Galway this year. Look at the great work that Galway did at the beginning of the league, and they ended up finishing third in the league. So that good work would be rewarded. Like, the season's not lost. You know the point that I'm making there? Kerry, the same thing. They won the league, and all of a sudden, you know, they'd be ranked number one because of that in the playoffs. And so there's another thing in play here as well, where everything moves towards playoffs, and playoffs is the last 16, and then you've got the 8, and then you've got the 4, and I think that in itself, you know, would create a phenomenal cutting edge, because people are talking about, you know, scrap the provincial championships and let's have an open draw, and there's a bit of merit in that, and then there's merit in keeping the provincial championship because of last year, but we can have the whole thing and connected, and everything worthwhile for everybody at every level, including the county boards, including the sponsors, and including the players. And so for me, these are all the sort of the variables, the stakeholders that are going to make this thing happen. But there's a win-win situation for all those people, which makes it, I think, an interesting proposal. You know?
Yeah, and I think for the kids, Jim, and the youngsters from these counties, and let's go, Dad, let's put the flask, the sandwiches. We're heading to Limerick for the double-header. Kerry and Galway are on first, and we're playing Leitrim above, and it'll be big now if we can win. We've got this crowd in the quarter-final. I think a big thing that people have spoke about this year, Jim, this real knockout football has brought a bit of an edge back to it. So in the instance that you're talking about in this format, we're getting knockout football in the provincial championships, and you're getting knockout football in the playoffs. And
exactly.
I think the time you spent in Charlotte, I'm delighted with you calling them playoffs. That brings me back to the basketball and the season defining always down to playoffs and knockout, whether it be the Super Bowl, it's your ranking. Every game matters because of you're going to have an easier game. You're going to have a tougher route to the final. Teams win it going the tougher route. Teams win it being the top seed, but it doesn't guarantee everything because there's always that fear of the knockout element. I think you're getting that with this marketing, Jim. Let's dice into marketing a small, but then you look at the job we'll say AIB have done with the club championship and the toughest. Like you see what Lidl have done with the ladies championships. Unbelievable marketing efforts that have put all these competitions to the forefront of our minds, that we see it on TV during the winter, the club, and we see all the ladies games on now. We see the commercials on television. Who's to say that someone wouldn't come in and try and take this Tailteann Cup to the next level, use the stars of these teams, because there is plenty of stars in these teams to use it in promotion, and their profile rising again out of it and adding a bit more spice to it. It is an important factor. That's another thing that I think the players in these teams are slightly fearful for. Will we be forgotten about when it comes to the marketing side of things?
Yeah, 100%. But one point they made there that I think is crucial. There's a lot of brilliant players in this country that are never exposed.
Yes.
We never see them. We don't see them enough. And I think that's very, very unfair. And so that's one point I'd like to make. And then the other point is...
And I'll come back at you and hold it in your head. I always saw myself that I would have been a very average footballer, I think, sometimes on a weaker team, because my skill set on the good team, we'll say, was to get the ball and bring the really good footballers that I had around me. But I'd often look at these teams and go, geez, if you could transport an Emlyn Mulligan into a team here, you know, or if you could pick Brendan Murphy from Carlow, he'd start in the middle of the field for Kerry possibly. And, you know, you're right, you would give these fellas a bigger platform, which is important for them as well.
And I think it's going to raise standards. Because there's none of this. There's none of this. We're going to take it easy during the National League. There's none of this saving yourself from the get-go. You've got to be on it, and even you're in Division 4. You know, you must be trying to strive for 3. And if you get to 3 and you can get a good run and you can get promoted, you're back in the big time. You don't even have to win the second-tier competition. So everybody's fighting for something on day one. And if all that sort of unravels on you and it doesn't go the way that you're hoping it's going to go, there's a second chance, and the second chance is the provincial championship. And if that doesn't go your way, then at your own level, then there's another chance to make that happen. And so for the whole season, people are engaged. And for me, crucially, there's hope. There's hope for everybody within the organisation. Everybody within the organisation feels part of the conversation, and feel that what they're bringing can be at the same level as what other teams bring. And I think that won't be lost on the powers that be in terms of the funding and the commercialisation around this. Because, you know, if you get those teams and the standards raising and the cutting edge of playoffs football in the championship in big stadiums, packed stadiums and tier 2, and these end up being brilliant games. Would it not be an amazingly enjoyable day out for everybody going to see those 2 games? You know, the teams that are waiting for their own team to come on afterwards, and the teams that have the supporters of the teams that have just played to be able to go then and see the best in the country, and the other players to be in the stadium and to be part of that day. And what do they do? How do they do it? The Division 1 teams, how do they warm up? How are they keeping the ball? How are they playing the ball inside? All of that is so important, to be close to that action, to be able to, you know it yourself, from managing Donegal, you know, everything that you're doing at county level, you see it in the clubs in the next couple of weeks, because the boys bring it back to their clubs. And what you're doing at county, and that's the way it works, and that will be the same at county level in that structure as well, I believe.
You're bringing it on. You're right. You're all Ireland final day. You put your minor game on at 12 o'clock. They're 17-year-olds. They're getting out in Croke Park, but you've got your winner of your Tailteann Cup climbing the steps. There's momentum to carry into next year. We're going on a holiday. There's a massive buzz. You're lifting that trophy in front of 70 or 80,000 people at that stage coming in to get while you're waiting for the other teams to come on and start their warm up a half an hour before the game. So that buzz and that lift for a player, and the chance of that every year, I think would really focus the teams in. As you say, if they don't make it where they finish in Division 1 or Division 2, if they don't make it to the Sam Maguire race by not winning their provincial championship, it gives the teams real focus, and you get to build momentum. I think we see constantly Division 3 and Division 4 teams get dumped out in a damp squib of a qualifier, and they creep away off, and there's nothing really to go on, because they meet a powerhouse from Cork gets knocked out of Munster, or Kerry gets knocked out of Munster, and it's a bit of an open draw, and you have these anomalies of these teams coming through. But I think that is momentum for teams, momentum for players to keep them coming back next year, because I think there's an awful lot of that now. Will I play next year? Will I do it all again for that type of a finish? But if there's the hope there of, yes, we're building something, yes, we're getting better, and no matter what happens in Division 3 or Division 4, or no matter what happens in our provincial championships, I think we can make a good run at this Tailteann Cup. Now, that rejuvenates you for that year. It puts you back in the gym earlier. And as you say now, all the standards are being raised. So I think it's something that is exciting. I think it's something that we have to look at pushing through, Jim. I know Congress dilly and dallies over a lot of these things for a long time, and it has to get a certain vote. I think it was refreshing this year for the GA to realise we've got to go knockout football. We've got to put it on this time of year. And there was no problem. There was no Congress. So I think really pushing something through like this, getting it pushed through quickly, would be really exciting momentum to move on to these, hopefully the start of these leagues in February. And as you rightly say, there's fireworks on day one in every league division next year, because they know the following year is going to have a massive bearing on what they're about. Yeah. You're always trying to look at it from every angle, Kieran, and one of the big ones for me is, where could it fall down, you know? And I really believe in the structure, I really believe in the structure, but it could fall down. And for me, where it could fall down is that it isn't backed, that it isn't supported, that it isn't advertised, that the money isn't put in to support the teams that are in that from an advertisement point of view, from a training point of view, from the best hotels, the best travel, you know, the best kit. All of that needs to be in place for all these teams, or it will not work. It will just simply end up being an us competition and a them competition. And to be brutally honest with you, I think, you know, the lesser teams, in inverted commas, are sick of that. They're sick of that. They're sick of being over there and not having this hope and not having these sort of aspirations, sort of being in touch and distance and being in reality. And I know we have had an amazing year this year with 2 teams from Division 3 bucking the trend. But in this situation, that could be much more common, because everybody will not be happy with where they're at. You must get up one level from next year, and another one, and another one. And it'll take time for the whole thing to develop and grow. But over a period of time, I believe all the teams will get stronger, because you'll be looking at your neighbour and you'll be thinking, you know, regardless, we're all in Division 4 here, but we all want the same thing here. And that's going to have big implications for us moving down the track. And so that rising tide, I believe, will be there. On the other side of it, the first tier situation, the best 16 teams in the country, you know, in knockout football, you know,
you don't have to say any more than that. That's championship football at its very, very best. No round robin, no Super 8s, that's not
no dead football. Games, no dead games.
That's proper championship football where anything can happen, to my mind. And most of the games should be played at provincial venues, to my mind, as well. And bring
that's an important point. That's an important point, Jim, because these games, when it starts whittling down, when you start getting into the last 8, they're going to be huge games. You bring them to provincial, you bring them to the simple stadiums, you bring them to the McHale Parks. You have this Tailteann Cup game on beforehand with two good teams as well going toe to toe. It bodes very well for excitement. It bodes very well for a buzz around the game. It bodes very well for more crowds at games. And look, obviously this year has been, I think there'll be more crowds at games anyway next year. But I really do think this would rejuvenate fans from all over Ireland to get behind their team and go with a realistic chance of winning and a realistic chance of moving on and trying to win something. And the fact that you have your final on the same time as your All-Ireland final, you're guaranteeing them 70 or 80,000 at the end of their game. You're guaranteeing the players getting massive recognition, lifting that cup.
There's no safety net either, Kieran. There's no safety net. And that's the bottom line. And that's why people have been calling for that this season, the fact that there isn't a safety net. And when that game's coming down the track and there's 20 minutes left to go, it's a different animal, so it is. And for me, crucially, there's a sense of there's a sense of fairness to the All-Ireland. It's just a sense of fairness. There's a sense of fairness, that everybody's doing their best for their county during the league. Everybody's going out to wholeheartedly win the provincial championship, and then they're approaching the playoffs, whichever tier they're in the same manner as every other team in the country. It's a fresh start, and it's championship football again. And so I think there's just a real sense of fairness, and good work is appreciated and good work is rewarded. And so all those things, when you pull them together, just leaves everybody part of the conversation, as I said earlier.
Yeah, look, thanks for that, Jim. Look, very interesting. And I think, if I was from, as you rightly say, a supposed Tier 2 team, I think I'd be excited on the back of it. So thanks for sharing that insight. Thanks for coming on OTB AM. Look forward to seeing you on Sky Sports Mix live in person. 4:30, I think Kevin and we're on air for Kevin versus Dublin. And then obviously Sunday, looking forward to the Tip and Mayo game. So look forward to seeing you the weekend. Thanks for coming on and be safe.
Thank you, Kieran.
No bother, Jim.
Yeah, Jim McGuinness in conversation with Kieran there. A reminder that you can watch both lads on analysis across the weekend on Sky Sports Mix as they bring you both All-Ireland football semi-finals live. Sky Sports Mix is available in approximately 900,000 homes in Ireland on Sky Channel 416 and on Virgin Channel 409. Right, OTB AM is live weekday mornings from 7:30 with thanks to Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the mornings ahead. Back Monday morning, by the way, with Ger and Nathan. Will Nathan be sitting here jubilant after Mayo have set up an All-Ireland final against Cavan? We shall see. You'll get all the reactions with your weekend sport on that occasion. Right now, though, we're bringing you some John Giles. Enjoy.
Evening, John.
Evening, Nathan.
So speaking of European football, it was a big night for a young Irishman, Caoimhín Kelleher, thrown in at the deep end. Champions League debut for Liverpool and a clean sheet and some fine saves against Ajax. Living the dream.
Oh, definitely. And he looks the part, Nathan. Great temperament by the sound. I don't know the kid at all. I know he's a Cork lad. And apparently, reading the papers today, he used to be a very, very good outfield player.
Yeah, which obviously for the modern goalkeeper comes in quite handy.
Very handy. But the main thing is saving. And now he looked very, very confident, competent. He looked everything that you wanted a young keeper to come into a big match like that, Nathan. It looks great. It's great for us, great for himself, of course, and the family. Wish him all the best for the future.
It's a difficult situation for a young goalkeeper compared to any other position on the pitch because you're reliant on one other player being injured, and Liverpool have arguably the best goalkeeper in the world in Alisson. He's at a huge club. He already has a Premier League medal, a Champions League medal. If you were advising him at 22, would you say hang around Liverpool for as long as you can and hope the chance comes? Or do you actually just need to get out somewhere else and play football?
I'd say go out and loan, Nathan, and do what the young keeper did at Manchester United.
Dean Henderson.
Henderson, you know,
United, yeah.
Like he's gone back now and he's out of the team again. But I think at some stage, well, at any stage, you need experience. And I think it's okay playing in the reserves for a certain period of time, even for an outfield player. But particularly goalkeepers, Nathan, they need to be in the big crowd, in the big games, when they're good enough to do it. And he's obviously good enough to do it. So I think the best thing, if I was giving him any advice, I would say try to get out and loan and do what Henderson did at Manchester United.
As you say, he didn't look nervous. Look, he played in League Cup games before, and he's obviously been around the Irish senior squad from time to time as well. So he has a little bit of experience behind him, but he didn't look nervous. When you go back to when you made your debut, were you nervous when you started out at Manchester United?
Well, I think everybody's nervous, Nathan. It depends what type of nervousness you have.
Yeah.
You know, like I've seen lads who weren't able for it, they're nervous and they're shaking.
Right.
But the nervousness, the ideal nervousness, is obviously because it's a big match, it's a big day. You're going to be nervous, but those nerves are under control. And my feeling on lads who are getting into the teams not on a regular basis, but particularly your first one, I think that's what you're alluding to now. When I played my first match, I was looking forward to it.
Right.
Of course, I'd be nervous, but nervousness, you have to have the nerves, that sort of nervousness, Nathan. You know, to get you going, you're up there, but my feelings on players that I knew that wanted to play, who are going to be players, they had a certain amount of show-offness, if that's the right word, in it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You knew you were good. You wouldn't be there if you weren't good enough in these particular clubs to get out there and show everybody how good I am. Not in a big-headed way. You know, the ideal way, because if you're going out there shaking, you wouldn't be in that position in the first place, Nathan.
Yeah.
You know, you don't suddenly get into now I'm talking about my time at Manchester United, when I made my first appearance. You know, I was only 18, short of 19 at the time, but I was nervous in the right way, because if you're shaking nerves, you wouldn't be there in the first place. Because at Manchester United, for example, I had to go through the youth team, the Youth Cup team, which was a big thing. Yeah. You had to go through the reserves. Now, if you're going to show your nerves, you're going to show them in those matches. So you wouldn't make it to the first team, Nathan.
Is there not something different and when you're making your Manchester United debut, like Bobby Charlton is probably playing that day, is there not a nervousness of walking out and the pressure of playing with players of that calibre and feeling the need to show them that you belong there?
Well, I didn't feel that way,
right.
Nathan. You know, obviously I'd be nervous because I'd want to do well. But I think at that stage, you know, when I played in the Youth Cup for Manchester, that's the reserves, which is very high standard. And you've come through schoolboy football as well. So in my opinion, there's a certain attitude of showing off. In other words, I want to get out there.
Right.
I know Bobby Charlton's playing, he's a great player. Dennis Voilet, you respect all these players. But you really want to show what you can do.
Yeah.
Not in a big-headed sense, because obviously the night before, the morning you make up, always after my last match, you'd be in... You know, you'd be away with the fairies when you woke up on Saturday morning, because that's all a build-up to playing. You see, I think playing football at a certain level, Nathan, is not natural. You know, you don't just put on your boots and play. There's a build-up to it. I used to find from Saturday morning, I'd wake up and there'd be a certain nervousness about me. I'd be away with the fairies. You know, my head wouldn't be having a bit of breakfast. I'd be away with it. So by the time you're ready to go out on the pitch, your nerves have been built up. You need the nerves. If you don't have nerves before a match, you won't build up. You won't get the adrenaline that you need when you go out to play. Like I always felt that football at a certain level is not natural. It's like a top singer, an opera singer, or Frank Sinatra going out on the stage. There's no way he just starts singing. There has to be a build-up to it. Anything that you do, whether it be a tennis player or a rugby player, a Gaelic player, hurling player, there's a build-up to that situation, which, as long as it's under control, Nathan, gives you the adrenaline to go and to cope with the situation and do your stuff.
And when you say when you woke up on a Saturday morning and you're away with the fairies, do you mean you're there, you're daydreaming, you're imagining what might happen in the match? Are you thinking about the game?
Well, you're not quite thinking about it as detailed as that, but you're not there either.
Right.
You know, You know the match is on your mind. It's not in detail. You don't think, well, I have to do this and I have to do that. But you know, say at 9 o'clock in the morning, there's a match on today. Because you wouldn't be human if you didn't know there was a match on, Nathan. So now you have to handle it from then on. So as you get through the morning, then the nerves build up. So as you're out of a nervous state, which is ideal, by the time you're going out on the pitch to play.
Mm. And would you have seen...
You don't just put your boots on. You don't just put your boots on and say, oh, I'm going out to play today. You know, there is a nervousness. You're playing in front of 50,000. In the cup final, you're playing in front of 100,000 people. But there's a bit of show-offness in you as well, Nate, because you want to show the 100,000 people how good you are, you know? But you're also aware of the downfall if you're not going to be good.
Right, so
thing as well.
You were looking at... I was wondering that. So were you relentlessly positive in those hours building up of, I'm going to play in front of 50, 100,000 people, think of all that can go right for me today and how I could end up as the hero today, or is part of you going,
no,
I don't want to fall flat?
It's the other way, Nathan.
Right, it's the fear of failure.
Yes. Yeah, right. You don't think I'm going to go out, I'm going to go and do this. No, you're thinking, I've got to do my stuff today.
Yeah.
First of all, you've got to help the team to win, but you're playing in front of 100,000 people. But there's an excitement to it as well. You know, there's a mixture. There's a mixture, as I say. You don't say, oh, God, I've got to play in front of 100,000 today. You know, your main thing is positive. I want to play in it, because that's what I felt anyway. I think most lads would feel the same. When you're a kid... I mean, I used to support Manchester United. They won the Cup in 1948. Jackie Carey, the great Irish player and manager. I want to do that. I want to play in those matches. I want to play at the Cup final. But you're also aware, I've got to do my stuff. Yeah. I don't want to have a nightmare today and turn it the other way round. But you have to know, you have to be confident of your ability as well, Nathan.
And did you see the lads you're talking about there who... you know, could be in the dressing room shaking beforehand with the nerves? Did you often see players who were like that in the dressing room in the minutes leading up to the game, but actually, when the whistle blew and the match started, they were perfectly fine?
No.
Right.
No. If they're not doing it in the dressing room, you're a gunner. I did play with a few players like that, you know, but they didn't last. Okay. You know.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was a couple. Now we played in the Cup final in 1965. Against Liverpool, Liverpool, the first great Liverpool team, and we qualified. We'd only first year in the first division, and qualified. And there was a couple of lads in the team, I won't name them, who weren't up to it.
Right. We can Google in this day and age, John. So people can go and figure it out from themselves. And what, that you could just tell that Cup final day was too much for them?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do at that stage, or the senior members of the squad at that stage can do to just try and calm those players?
No, they wouldn't be excited.
Right.
They'd be quiet. They would look quite natural. They would look quite natural, Nathan. You wouldn't know before the match. You know what I mean? But you could tell. And I used to find, watching the Cup finals and playing the Cup finals, there was at least one player on the pitch that couldn't handle it. From either side.
Right.
Either side.
Are you looking round for that player?
Not particularly.
Right.
Well, especially when he's on your side. But it happens, you know.
Yeah. While we're talking about that, do you remember your debut then? Do you remember the day vividly that you made your Manchester United debut?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I remember it well, Nathan. I knew from the day before. Actually, we played the Wednesday in the Central League team. That was a reserve team at Leeds, funny enough, and we won 8-4 on the night, and I scored 3, which I had one of those good nights. And in those days, there was a player called Albert Quicksall. They paid a record fee for, wasn't well, or he was injured. So I knew on the Friday morning, Sir Matt Busby told me on Friday morning, I'd be playing on the Saturday.
Okay.
So I knew.
So you had time to prep for it.
Yeah. So the Friday, I remember the Friday, I slept okay.
Yeah.
And I was okay on the Saturday. I mean, it was a bad day in the end. We were beaten 5-1 by a great Spurs team coming on to their best years with Danny Blanchflower and Cliff Jones and...
Dave Mackay?
Dave Mackay. One of the greats.
So was Dave Mackay playing middle of midfield or centre-back for Spurs?
Oh, no, he was playing in midfield.
So you're going up against Dave Mackay in your debut?
Yeah, and Danny Blanchflower. And they're funny enough. That was Dave Mackay just come down from Scotland.
Yeah.
At that season, and they should have won the league that year. That was 1959. They should have won it. They blew it, and the following year, then they won the double.
Yeah.
But
So
they were great. Dave Mackay was one of the greats.
Yeah.
One of the greats.
So did your family get to come over for your debut?
My father came over.
Right.
Yeah, father came over.
Would you have come over to a lot of your games?
No.
Right.
No, it wasn't that easy to travel in those days, Nathan. He came over now and again.
And what would he say after a game like that, after you made your Manchester United debut?
No, he said I did okay. He thought I did okay. You know, I mean, I wasn't responsible for the 5 goals, obviously, but no, I did okay, Nathan, on the day. You know, I didn't have a nightmare, and I did okay, but we were just outclassed as a team with this great Spurs team at that particular time.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the day. You know, I enjoyed it because I knew I wasn't too nervous. I was okay. I was able to handle it. There was 60,000 at the match, and I was okay.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't enjoy the result, of course, but I enjoyed the day.
Yeah, it's great. And great to have such good memories of it as well.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, your Mo supported our frontline workers this